Welcome everyone to today's live day. This is the 10th episode of this live day. It's called Student Day, and today we are going to learn a little bit about something when you're still learning how to code, maybe how to get jobs and stuff. So we have 4 talks today. All of them are amazing topics for everyone that is still learning. But before we start, let's take a little bit look at something. For example, we have a code of conduct. This should be known, but just be nice to each other, respect each other, and just use common sense when interacting in the chat, and then we're all fine. Vincent, the clip. Roll. You might have noticed that I'm not your usual host. The usual host, Bene, is on a super secret mission. So that's why today I'm taking over for him. So for the rest of the day, I will be your MC. My name is Mark, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun together. Another thing I want to mention is that we have an event coming up, our World Congress, the WeAreDevelopers World Congress at the end of July, this 27th and 28th of July. And there are, for only today, you can use this code, WWC students, and you will get a 10% discount. You can use this, as I mentioned, until the end of the day. And yeah, please use the chat that we have available. When the speaker comes on, support them, maybe clap, send some emojis. If you have questions, send them there as well. I will pick them up and I will ask the speakers these questions. So now I would say we are going to start in a minute. You guys get comfortable, and I suggest you do the same as I do. Prepare your coffee. So let's just pour some coffee, and we're ready for our first speaker, Karol. Karol, he's a software engineer. Sorry. Karol is the head of engineering at SoftwareHut, and today he is going to talk a little bit about, the topic of his talk is don't shoot yourself in the foot. So what to avoid and how to be great at job interviews. So without further ado, welcome, Karol.
Mark? Okay.
There you are. Hello, okay. Karol. How are you doing?
Hello, hi. I'm fine. It's very nice to be a speaker at this event. And as Mark said, I will be talking about the common pitfalls the people tend to fall in during the interview when it comes to any kind of tech job, and not only a tech job. As it was said, I am head of engineering at the software company, the SoftwareHut. I have been in the business for over 15 years, and the people tend to make the same mistakes and gain huge benefits in the same places. So this will be the topic of my presentation.
Okay, so I think we're all set. This sounds to be very interesting. Take it away from here, Karol.
Okay, thank you very much. Once again, hello everybody, my name is Karol, and I would like to give you the presentation with the title, Don't Shoot Yourself in the Foot. First of all, there is going to be a little disclaimer. All the opinions and statements that we will hear in this presentation are mine and mine alone, and they are not to be connected with any company that I have to work with or am currently working for. Okay, just because. Okay, so shortly about me. I have been in the business for over 15 years. Currently, I'm working as a head of engineering at the software company, and running or overlooking a tech interview is a part of my daily job. In the current position, I have had over 350 candidates, and the common patterns tend to appear, both in people that do well and in people that did not so well. And this is what I want to talk about today. As I said, this presentation is based on a true story of the experience I had and two of my close colleagues that helped me to create this presentation. And yes, some part of the elements that you will see in this presentation can be found on the internet, and they are part of the best practices, and some not so much. So I strongly encourage you to stay away and listen. I'm sure you will learn something interesting. Before we start, this presentation is totally open for you to make any kind of comments, ask questions, anything you want, okay? The chat is open. I will be referring, hopefully, all the questions on the end of session. Reason why I'm encouraging you to ask questions is very simple. We all had technical interviews. We all have our experience regarding that topic. Plus, it is a soft skill, so you cannot have a wrong opinion. You cannot ask a wrong question. So if anything comes to your mind, feel free to drop me a line in the chat window or find me on the LinkedIn and connect with me. I am more than happy to talk about the subject with any and all of you. So let's start. First of all, I want to strongly encourage you to go on technical interviews, technical job interviews regularly. Okay? This is very simple. If you do something regularly, if you train for it, you became good at it. For example, I try to be on the 3-4 technical interviews a year, usually at the beginning of the year, because I want to get it out of my head. But still I do. Recently I was on the technical interview and learned super a lot about system design, and that definitely made me a better programmer, a better system designer. And that was mainly because I did poorly on the questions I have been asked. So that kicked me to learn something new, okay? So please make it a habit to go to technical interviews. And the question why? The question why is very simple, because if you don't go to tech interviews, if you don't check your knowledge, you don't know how much you are actually worth, okay? You presently can be in the super comfortable role in the company as a software developer, DevOps, whatsoever, and making a lot of money. But company may go out of business, something can happen, and you will be left standing without any current stack knowledge. And for other companies that are on the market, you can be worth a quarter of what you are worth to the current company, mainly because, for example, you are supporting some kind of legacy system that uses a stack that is nowhere else to be found, okay? So please check your value. I'm not encouraging you to change your job every year. I'm far from that. But I'm encouraging you to be aware what is going on in the market. I'm encouraging you to make your skill better and to check yourself, okay? Because you cannot lose anything by going to a technical interview, okay? You can simply improve yourself. This presentation will be separated into 3 modules. What happens before the interview, what happens during the interview, and what happens after the interview, okay? So going by the clock, let's start with what happens before the interview. When it comes to resume, people have some kind of strange behavior, some kind of ritual that resume always has to have a photo. It's not true. If you don't have a good photo, if you don't have a good business quality photo, you shouldn't be placing photos, especially where it can be clearly seen that you have been cropped from some kind of group photo, probably taken from some kind of a party or things like that, where you are very happy for many different reasons. Okay, so this is not a good photo, and the photo that is that is super low quality also isn't a good one. Okay, if you cannot provide good photo of yourself, don't put any at all. There's nothing wrong about it. it's better to put nothing than put something of a low quality. Okay, so this is the first thing. Second, and this also is surprisingly common for me, people tend to expose way too much of private data. For example, I don't need a last name of your mother, I don't need your social security number, I don't need your direct address or anything like that. Okay, the things where you live, but in the day of the online work, it's also not super required. Okay, put only the data that is valuable for the person that's going to interview you or for the position. Do not expose anything more, because in the era of data exposure, you don't want to help anyone by giving them your data in the plain document. Okay, think about the things you're putting in your resume when it comes to your private data. Okay, and funny thing with the resumes is that more often than not, I receive a CV resume, where it says I am a ASP.NET developer, I am a PHP developer, I am Java developer, or whatsoever, and this CV absolutely gives me nothing to work on. Okay, the person that sends this CV is more than sure to receive the typical set of questions that we have prepared for such a position, and this is the thing you don't want to have. Basically, your CV should contain two elements that can help me a lot to find your strengths. One is to give me some description of the products you have developed. Okay, tell me that you have developed something that had something to do with financial market. Tell me that you have worked extensively with Microsoft Azure or Amazon Cloud. Tell me that you are super hyped when it comes to API security, whatever that will separate you from the rest of the very similar CVs we are receiving. Okay, or, and this is a very great thing, place link to your GitHub repository. It is super valuable when I can see the code that someone has wrote, that I can run it, I can debug it, I can ask the person the questions about the code that was provided to me. Okay, we can engage in the discussion, and hopefully we wouldn't have to go to typical questions, because the typical questions were asked 100 times and they won't bring up your good game. Okay, the thing that you have provided that for the technical interviewer for me will put you in the lead, because you are sure that you will be asked about the topics you're strong about. Okay, that you feel confident. So give me something to help me help you. Okay, that's super important, and it's very often lacking, and all the CVs are basically generate the same, and that's not good, really. Don't make the CV too long, resume too long, because very often especially the experienced people can talk about many projects, and the resume can have like 4, 5, 6 pages, and nobody is going to read through all of that. So keep it like 1 page, 2 tops. Okay, I know that this advice can be found over the internet, but it happens very, very often, so it is worth reminding. Okay, be on time. This is super important because the people that is going to interview you probably is a busy person. Okay, usually the person is a senior in the company or a technical lead, or however the company is organized. What I'm getting at is that the person is busy and probably has like an hour for you, something like that. And if you are 15 minutes late, half an hour late, you are wasting the time that you can prove yourself. Okay, this is the main issue. That person won't be angry, nothing like that. You simply won't have time to show your strengths. And if you don't prove me that you can do something, that you can engage in some kind of subject regarding the tech stack of the project, I have to assume that you don't know it. So being on time is for your own good, and please keep that in mind. Okay, when sitting with the interviewer in the same room or in the same virtual space, please remember that interviewer wants you to succeed. Okay, if I'm interviewing a person for a role in the project, I want that person to succeed. Why? Because if the person succeeds, I won't be forced to interview any more people. I will be happy because hopefully I found the right person for the project, and I really want you to succeed. Okay, so the person at the other side of the table is your enemy. You both are having the same goals, and if you are sitting in that chair, it means that based on your resume, you are the person we are looking for. So you simply need to prove me that it is true. Okay, we have the same goal during the technical interview, to hire the best person. If you are in the chair, if you are being interviewed, the chances are you are the right person. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Okay, that was before the interview. Okay, so the mindset, the preparation, being on time, and the few things about the resume. Okay, so the technical interview starts. There are few subjects that shouldn't be brought in the job interview, in the technical job interview, by none of the participants. Okay, and those are political view and religion. Uh, that can be a bit controversial, but please keep in mind that people sometimes feel very emotional about their point of views, and the fact that you are more to the left side of the political spectrum or to the right side, you're being Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, shouldn't have an influence on the job you are applying to. So please keep all the reference verbal and based on your clothes, t-shirts, very often, sometimes often, reveal mostly the political views. Okay, you don't want that, because if you happen to stumble upon someone from the other point of view, they may simply feel bad about you. They would have a prejudice about you. I'm not saying it's good. It's very bad, but it happens. So keep your political, religion, and world views out of the job interviews. Okay, don't kill me for that statement, but it's true. Okay, it is seen very well if the person that wants to work in our company or in any other companies, really, because this is the third company when I'm actively hiring people, comes prepared. What I mean that is very simple. Please, before going to the interview in the company, read something about the company. Read about their culture, what projects they have done, or I don't know, check their Facebook to see where was the last party they have held. Okay, whatever that will show that you have put an interest, and it would make you more eager to engage in a small talk or anything like that. Okay, show the company that you care and that you put a bit of time, really, because it takes like 15 minutes top to see what is company all about. The larger the company, the longer that time should take. Okay, so this is a nice tip to check even in the bus when you are driving to the interview. Okay, so this is another thing to keep in mind. Come prepare. I don't know if any of you remember that movie. It is We Are the Millers or something like that. And the guy on the picture is surprised that they got paid for trafficking drugs from Mexico to US, something like that. Okay. As a junior developer or junior IT specialist, because you don't have to be developer to be IT specialist, you should be doing stuff for free, because it makes you a better developer, a better IT person. It helps you to get into community, to meet people, to talk with them, to engage with the conversation and make some very valuable connects. Plus, it sharpens your skill, whether is it through talking, writing, through going to the GitHub and picking some issues and creating a pull request. This is an awesome thing to do. If you're trying to get into IT job, to sharpen your skill, work on the issues in the open source projects, because for once you will be working with the other people, hopefully the people with better skill than you and with the professionals in what they are doing, especially in the large and popular packages. Plus, if you create a pull request that fixes an issue, you will be getting a code review from them, and it is super valuable because you will see how good your code is and if you are already skilled enough to work with the actual developers on production products, so on production environment, sorry. So if you have any spare time in your hands and if you want to improve your programming skills, use GitHub for that and fix some issues. You will do a lot of good and it will be of value for you. So yeah, please keep that in mind. Okay, and now for the more lighthearted slide. When it comes to job interviews, people often have problem if I ask them, tell me something good about yourself. And most of the time it looks like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm a developer. I have been coding for 5 years. I can create a CRUD. I do microservices. First, it is very basic and typical. And the second, people don't know how to brag in the positive way, but how to talk well about themselves. Okay, very often they're not able to talk a minute about their values, the value that they will bring to the company, their strong suit. It is a huge problem, and it is strange because many of those people are excellent developers and they simply cannot sell themselves. And that's why I got a little exercise for us all to execute right now. In a few seconds, the screen is going to go dark. I will stop talking for a minute. And for that minute, I have a question for you. Up loud or in your head, whatever you can. Please try to sell yourself for the technical interviewer. Okay, let's predict you're in the technical interview and you have received a question. Tell me what are your values and why should we hire you? Okay, so I'm going dark for a minute and do this exercise, please. Okay, and we're back. I'm fairly sure that it was a very long minute for some of you. I hope you succeed. If you don't, if you struggle with talking about your virtues for a minute, please exercise it. It will help you to put a good impression, to make a good impression, and will be of value in the technical interviews. Okay. Another thing that really doesn't work and people do quite often is making an excuses. Okay, someone comes to a technical interview, and at the very beginning or when the technical questions start coming, the person goes like that. I don't remember it because I'm tired. I don't know the answer because I have a hangover. I didn't prepare. I have partied last night. I'm sick, my dog was barking entire night, and so on and so on and so on. Okay. The truth of the matter is nobody cares. Okay, sorry for that, but if you come to the job interview, whether it is in the IT or any other field of business, you have to show the best version of yourself. Okay, if you are sick, because it happens, give us a call. Tell, okay, sorry, I got a flu. When I get better, I will get back to you. I don't know. I'm having a stomach ache. I will be in your office in 2 or 3 days when I get better. Don't come and make excuses. Nobody will care or nobody will believe you. Okay, so if you come as the best version of yourself. Okay, this is expected of you. It can be a little harsh, but that's the truth. So sorry. Don't lie. The good chances are that the person interviewing you knows as much as you, or significantly more about the subject they have asked you, because they are working with the technology daily, and they are using it in the project. So if you start lying, there are great even chances that you will get caught, and you don't want that. There are many questions in the tech interview, and you don't have to answer all of them. If you don't know the answer, simply say, sorry, I don't know, I wasn't using that anything, and go to another question. By lying, you are showing yourself as a liar, effectively, plus you are wasting the time. You could be answering the other question and proving your value. So don't lie. It's a double lose for you if you start doing so. And as mentioned on the previous slide, you don't have to be super focused on answering on all the questions. Usually, the question range is quite broad, and the goal of the set of the questions is to find your strong suits, your strong points. And if you don't answer on all of them, most of the time it is okay, because I'm sure there are areas when you're strong, and simply try to elaborate and get into conversation on the subjects you feel strong about. Okay, and if you don't know the answer to the question, simply skip it. Okay, as Ivan Drago said, if he dies, he dies. Okay, if question dies, it dies. Nothing really happens. Okay, the thing that is a real pain, especially in the COVID era, is that people tend to have now we are in the post-COVID era. People tend to have technical interviews from strange places. That may be a shocker, but a Starbucks or a coffee place isn't the best place to have a tech interview, because it can get loudly. Okay, and if it gets so, you would have trouble concentrating, and I will be having trouble hearing what you are saying. And none of us wants any of that situation. Okay, so if you don't have an option to have a conversation from your home, try to find really quiet place, because bars, Starbucks, Pizza Huts, McDonald's aren't the best places to have a tech interview. Believe that. Okay, another strange thing that starts happening when people are having a lot of virtual technical interviews is Googling the question. And that may be a surprise for you, but it is visible if you are doing so. It happens really very, very often that I'm talking with someone, and there is sorry, I need to think about it, and I can hear him or her typing on the keyboard and turning the head to read an answer. It is okay to Google during your work. We all Google, we use or Stack Overflow or ChatGPT or whatsoever. But when we are having a one-to-one conversation, I want to see what is your take on the technology, what is state of your knowledge, what is your approach to the problem. If I want to know a Google approach, I will ask Google. Okay, so talk with me, and this kind of behavior forced me to ask people to have the camera on all the time, because it was really an issue that Googling and checking questions or having someone behind behind the laptop telling the answer or helping. It can be seen, it really is not fair for both sides, so please don't do it. Really, it's not worth it. Okay. The truth of the matter is that job interviews in the IT are very lighthearted, very direct when it comes to the conversation between the interviewer and the interviewee. We tend to talk to each other like we are friends, and working in the same fields only help. And that's absolutely cool. I don't want anybody to address me as a mister or something like that. It's totally out of place. But please try to reframe yourself from cursing, using swag, slang, or anything like that. Okay, it's not seen as something cool, trendy, anything like so. And if you are talking with someone that is significantly older than you, or has more experience, or is holding the management position, it can be seen as rude. To be truth, it happens more often to men than to women. And please, guys, don't do it. Okay, we can talk curse words and when we are grabbing a beer after work, but not during the tech interview. Okay. And there is one thing that for me, if the person that I'm interviewing does, is a total no-no. Okay, if they do it, for me the interview is basically over, and I don't want to work with that person ever. And the thing for me and for many interviewers is, sorry for the expression, talking shit. Okay, if you are talking bad things about your past or present company, about your coworkers, about your managers, about the client, for me, it is a huge warning light that in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, you will be sitting in the other company and talking smack about me or the project I am running or the company we have been or are working together. And if you are doing that, yeah, maybe the company is the problem that you don't get along. Maybe the company is the problem that the project failed. Maybe the company is a reason why something wasn't shipped. And maybe it is you. Maybe you lack the skill. Maybe you're a toxic person, and I don't know that. And at this point, that you are addressing that is that there is something toxic going on in your current work, I have a 50-50 chances that you are the cause of it. And I won't take the chances. I give you that. I won't do it. Never. Yeah, these kind of answers usually pop up when you are being asked the question like, why are you changing job? Or what is your current company like? Or what are you doing currently? And if when being asked a question, what are you doing currently in your job? Your answer is dealing with idiots. That's a no-no. Okay, I don't want to work with you, even if you are an excellent developer, because technology can be taught. Manners, not so much. Okay, so if being asked the question, why are you looking for a new job while having the current one, or so answer, I'm looking for new challenges. I want to change the domain I'm working on. I want to develop my skills with the other set of people. I like the clients that you are working with. I like the culture of your work. I like the opinions you're having on Google or wherever. Okay, don't talk smack about anyone you currently or have been working with. Really, it will be a totally no if you start doing so. Okay, so this also can be a tricky question, and prepare yourself for that. Okay, so we have reached the point of after the interview. the technical part of the interview. And usually when I'm running the interview or someone in my company is running an interview that I'm overlooking, there also always a part. And the end of the session usually takes around 10 minutes, something like that. When we talk with the candidate, we let him or her ask the questions and so on. And first of all, no fighting. If you don't like the interview, if you don't hit your mark with the questions, don't fight with the interviewer. Don't start arguing that you want another round of questions, that the interviewed wasn't prepared, that I don't know, there are many reasons really. Because nobody is going to get for that. You are knowing you won't make anybody afraid of you. You will simply make a bad impression, and you would have the doors closed in this company and companies that are befriended to the company you have been interviewed to. Okay, if it wasn't your day, it wasn't your day. It happens. Okay, there's nothing wrong about it. If the interview was bad for you by simply not answering the questions, okay, you come out of this experience stronger. You know where you failed. Don't argue with the HR. Don't argue with the person at the reception desk. Don't argue with the interviewer or the project manager you have been talking to. It won't do anything good, and unfortunately, it happens when the interview isn't a successful one. Okay, talk to me. There is always a part of time in the job interview session when I ask you, do you have any questions for me? Would you like to know something about the company, about the culture, about the technology? You name it, okay? And don't be silent at that point. I know that you don't have to be super excited about the company because for many people, IT is just a job, and that's perfectly okay. But ask me something. Ask me about the IDE we are using. Ask me about the approach to the cloud, whether we use CLI or I don't know, if we are using a bicep, if we are using, I don't know, there are so many questions depending on the technology you are working with. But ask me anything. Talk with me, okay? Ask me how was the, I don't know, last party, what are the good parts of working in this company, okay? Engage into conversation. Show me or any other interviewer you're interested in our company, in something more than just money in your paycheck. Okay, that's a good tip. At the beginning of the presentation, I asked you to ask me as many questions as come to your mind. I will try to answer them. But did you have any situation that the interviewer did something that you didn't like? Because it also happens, and I'm planning to create a presentation about the bad things that the interviewers did, because we are as much as guilty as you are. So yeah, I'm not making someone better, someone worse. So yeah, if you have any unpleasant or super pleasant situation that you have come across during your interview process, please share it in the comment section or drop me a line at LinkedIn. I will gladly talk with you. Okay, and we have reached the Q&A part of the presentation. So hopefully Mark will step in and show us the question. Okay, he's connecting.
Oh, muted. All right, thanks a lot, Karol. There's a lot of very insightful things there, and we have a bunch of questions from the audience.
Okay, let's do it.
I wrote also down some that I have, so we look with the time to see if we can get all of them.
Well, so, quite good.
A reminder, everyone that is watching this, if you have a question, you can still ask it, and I will bring it forward to Karol. Okay, let me see. Cool Q&A. Okay, first question.
Can you please also paste them into the chat in the in our private lobby?
Yeah. I will. Hold on. I will do it this way. Okay, how can you handle tough questions or situations during a job interview?
Okay, as for the tough questions, it depends. Okay, that is a super multi-layer question. Okay, so let's go from the bottom. First of all, is that if the question is tough, tell me anything you know about it. For example, I like the question when I'm interviewing a person for the .NET developer role. The question is, your ASP.NET application starts running slow. Please tell me how would you check the issues. Okay, it's a super broad question because it can be due to CSSs, to images. It can be due to some kind of bandwidth issues. It can be due to the databases, to the memory leak, anywhere. And this is a hard question because sometimes people say don't know, and they know. Okay, they have at least checked one of that. So if you have any thoughts on any part of the question, address it. That will show that you are at least a bit familiar with the question, with the topic. Plus, the tough question, at least from my side, very often has an agenda that someone will ask me more about it. For example, what kind of database we are using, or what kind of .NET, because I'm a .NET person, sorry, we are using. So how can we approach the memory leak? Okay, elaborate on it as much as you can if you have any knowledge. If you don't have any knowledge, as I said, say, okay, I'm sorry, I have never tackled that issue. Can I please have another question? Because lying and making stuff up won't help you. So yeah.
I think this is also a great opportunity to show your problem-solving skills. So if you don't know exactly,
absolutely.
so you go, okay, I'm not sure, but I would do this and this, and I would check this. Maybe I would need to do a search for this. I will see the result, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So I think you can work the interviewer through your thought process, which is a great opportunity to show it.
Yeah, the great example of that is if you, for example, Google search on the YouTube the system design interview for Google, Facebook, whatsoever. Usually the process goes like so. It starts with a small portion of question, and then you build upon it as the conversation goes. So those are the approach for the hard questions. And if you don't know, sometimes you don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Second question, are there some buzzwords to use in your resume so it sticks out a little bit more?
The buzzwords that I like, for example, is working on the open source. Okay, it's always great because, as I said, you are working with the other developers. Being engaged in some kind of community events. For example, I try to do a lot of talks mostly about around the Poland and now more in the Europe. Work with your community in your city wherever you're settled. It's super great place to start. Write a blog, engage in some kind of discussions, whether it is underneath the conversation in the YouTube video, on the Polar site, Udemy, or wherever you are using. Those are the things that I look forward. So you're doing something other than listing the technologies and checking another bootcamp. So
yeah, so basically be active in the community, right?
Yeah, definitely.
In some sort of way. Okay, cool. Next question. Is there a programming language or tech stack that you would recommend to learn first to achieve the first developer job? This is
okay. I stopped sharing the screen because at this point, it is a super hard question, and I get it more often than you can think. Because for the 5 years I have been working at the university and teaching people the technology. At this point, it's JavaScript, and it's a very hard question, mostly because you cannot force yourself to do something because there are many jobs that are very well paid. Okay, Java developer, JavaScript developer, PHP, Python, .NET, Go developers, database people, DevOps, cloud engineers are being super well paid right now. So that's crazy. And basically, please take advantage of the fact that you can learn a lot about any of these stacks over the internet absolutely for free. Okay, I'm thinking YouTube articles, whatsoever, and try it. See what sticks. Okay. For example, Azure has a free program that you can see if you are good at something regarding the cloud. Amazon Cloud also has something. I don't know how it looks with the other cloud because I'm using those two ones. Okay, don't force yourself into something. If you see that you are good in the web, you see the issues that some sites have not being friendly for you, maybe you should go into the UX. If you like algorithms, try backend development. Give it a try, really. Spend, I don't know, a month on every technology and find something that fits you. It will be much easier for you to learn it, to be good at it, because it will be a pleasure, not a chore. This is the best advice I can give. And see the job boards. What are the salaries? What are the requirements? And if you start, for example, learning to be .NET developer, okay, go through the job board like the WeAreDevelopers, for example, and you will see what are the requirements. It is a great place to start because you're not making stuff up, but you see what is of value in the market. So you have like read a list of the skills you need to acquire to be able to do the job. So that's huge.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question. How can you follow up after an interview to improve your chances of getting hired?
It is really a hard question because basically after the interview is wrapped up and the decision is on our side, what you can do for the future reference is to ask for the interviewer opinion on you. And we are giving such an opinion if being asked for, and I'm maybe not so many details. Okay, I will refer the question in a second. Maybe not so many details as for the HR, but I will tell you, for example, okay, you have done well here, and you're lacking in, for example, the microservices area and in the database and so on. That probably it won't change the income of that interview, but it will make you better, and you will see what were the pitfalls if you don't get the job. So it will help you in the future in this company or any other. I'm always providing that kind of summary if being asked, and most companies do.
Okay, perfect. Next question. How much information should you share about yourself during a job interview, and what topics should you avoid? I think you touched a little bit on that already.
Okay, this is $1 million question. And the issue with that is that not all the things, life isn't fair, okay? And most of the time, unfortunately. And don't tell the things for the interviewer that may be used against you, okay? So for example, don't tell the people that a year ago or something like that, I was having a lady at the job interview, and I asked her what is the half-year gap in the resume, and she told me that she got burnout, and wasn't feel like working. It was honest answer. I'm happy she get back to the market, but for me it's a huge red flag that maybe she will get burnout in my project. It's not fair, I know, but those sort of things happen, and as I say, don't show anything that can be used against you. So like in American movies, everything you said can be used against you. So think about if the things you're saying are the things that the company, the interviewer needs or has to know about you. Okay.
So how would you handle that then if there's a gap for half a year, if you have burnout and you're confronted with it? What should you do? Should you say, I don't want to answer, or?
I don't want to answer. I was surprisingly the good answer is I was having familiar issues, health issues, because this is something that would pass. Okay. So Sorry.
I mean, burnout is a health issue. So
it's a health issue, but it's being treated somewhere different than the others, unfortunately.
As you say, it's not fair. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not fair. Yeah, I'm not saying it is, but if there are many people applying for the position, the best one, the one that will provide the most value for the company, will be chosen. Okay, it's a market, it's a business, and every company wants to make money. Sorry, at the start I said it's going to be an honest presentation, and there you have it. What was for making a good impression during the job interview? As I said. Look interested, and very often you are. The developers, the IT people, tend to like what they're doing, okay? And that's really exciting for me, because very often when I'm talking to people, they are actually interested, they think passionate about what they're doing. Some time ago, it was like 9 or 10 months, the guy at the job interview was showing me what he created at Unity with the C#, because I found it in his Git repository, and we started talking about it. And basically we went out through like 2 typical questions, because it's talking about the things he developed burn out the entire time in the extremely positive way. He wasn't hired for the SoftwareHut, because at that point we weren't hiring the people for the Unity, but it was hired in our sister company, because we were looking for someone to do the VR, and he was the perfect fit. But as I said, he showed me his strong suit, but giving me some points that we can elaborate on. So how to make a good impression? Be polite, show your skill, show me there are something that differentiates you from all the others job appliance for Java 9 developer I have received. I hope it's Java 9, because I'm not a Java developer. Maybe it's 10. Sorry. But make a good impression and show us your strong suit, because I know that you can learn basic technologies or the basic stuff if you are super interested in something. So
Okay, next one. I'm changing my career from marketing to development. How can I present this to have some advantage? This is
super hard question.
I mean, knowing marketing as a developer is gold for companies, if you ask me.
Okay, maybe not. It depends what do you want to do. Because changing strictly for the developer, basically what it leaves you with is creating the solutions that are rooted to marketing background, okay? But there is a huge field like technical managers, something like that, and the product owners in that line of business, the marketing knowledge and the technological development knowledge is a gold combination. So think if you really want to change your career, or do you want to extend your skills, and I will strongly advocate with the second option. Okay, try to build upon what you already know. If you are a marketer, the huge market right now is to work as a cloud engineer, cloud salesman, or a cloud cost optimizer. Sorry, I lost the word for the role. Okay, because at this point you have a huge marketing knowledge. You know how to sell. You know how the market works. Plus, build some cloud knowledge on it, and it's a very well combination. So think about extending, not changing, because by changing you are basically dumping what you already have. And there are so many fields in the IT right now that I'm sure marketing skills, and as I said, with DevOps or with cloud, like cost optimization, it's huge, really. So think about it.
Okay, cool. Next one. I just have a degree in computer science and IT, but I don't have experience. What can I do to get an entry-level job?
Okay, 2 things. Apply. Okay, that may sound a little tedious, but apply to as many as you can. Okay, if you just got a computer science degree, build on it. Okay, after every single interview, you will come stronger. Simply try to learn, try to exercise on the things that you have failed on. There's no one go-to way, but eventually you will get there. but it's a process. Okay, go to 1, 5, 10, 15, 20 interviews. Don't give up, and after each one of them, you are better. And basically, that's all it is. There's no one key to open the door, but yeah, they can be open.
I mean, you can always get experience in open source, as you mentioned before.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
already that. I think that counts as experience, right?
For me, it does. Yeah, I really like
at least
seeing the open source
it's
contributors.
a good shot, right? Okay, we have 5 minutes left, so we have a few more questions. Let's try to get through them a little bit to see if we can get them all resolved. So
top 3 questions to ask at the end of the interview. Okay. Okay, so maybe I will change that question a little bit to top 3 questions that I find I find the most valuable. Ask me about how is work in the company. Are there any issues? What are the strong things about the company? What can I learn from your company? It's good because you're showing that you're interested in something more about than just the money. What else? Funny thing is, for example, ask us what is our approach to the cloud, because it is a very broad subject right now, and we can talk about it for hours. Whether we go full on-premise, whether we go full cloud, whether we go hybrid. How do we approach DevOps? It's also a huge point of dispute, because some people think that DevOps is a position. Some people think that DevOps is a culture that needs to be set all across the company. The questions that will get me talking to you, and the question where you can present your point of view, for example, saying, I'm for the hybrid approach because the approach when we are using the infrastructure in the cloud and databases on-prem usually tends to be cheaper in the long-term runs for the huge databases. Okay, and that gives us something to elaborate on. So
I think in general, like being interested in how it works, right? How can I grow there? How does my regular job day look there? With whom will I work? Well, who will I report to? So okay, cool. I think you have time for one more question. Oh, this doesn't. Why a lot of companies don't send feedback after an interview, or they give it just after a long time?
I don't know. I said interview. Yeah. So sorry.
Okay, next one. As a new student in web development, would you recommend starting as an employee or directly as freelancer, starting your own company?
If you can, it's a hard question, really. If you don't have any hands-on experience, it might take some time to get a steady job, let's say 9 to 5, where you will get steady income. So if you have time, if you have skills you want to build on, you want to get better, start your company, start freelancing. If you don't like it, you will go to job market with experience in your hand. There are really no downside in starting as a freelancer, because the good chances are you still will be coding in your free time, because hopefully you like it. And as a freelancer, you will be coding for money and experience. So.
Okay, and I think this is the last question we can take. Several times you say CV, but incorrect. You just have to resume. Is there a difference?
No, but it was pointed to me some time ago that the more formal way of saying it is resume, so I'm trying to erase it from my vocabulary. It was simply my improvement process. Okay, good. Then I would say, Karol, thanks a lot for all your
Thank
you very much. Thank you for having me. And I go again for all the participants. If you want to talk a little bit more, follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. I will be more than happy to talk with you all.
Yeah, there were some more questions. So everyone that has asked a question and it wasn't answered here, just connect with Karol. He will.
Yeah, connect with me.
Get back to you.
No problem. Surely.
Okay, so
have a great
Karol.
day. Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye. All right, so now we come to our second speaker, which is Eleanor Ramsey. She is software engineer at Fellow, and she's going to talk about her talk, how to fail successfully. So she's going to talk a little bit about what to do as an intern in a new company. So now you had the job interview, you got the job, then you are maybe an intern. What's next? So that's what we are going to see. Welcome, Eleanor.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Great.
All right.
So what are we going to learn today from you? I touched it a little bit, but I think you can tell us a little bit more about what we learned.
Yeah, you pretty much got it. So I've been an intern quite a lot in my career in software. I was an intern for 4 companies during my degree, and I think that I've learned a lot about what it means to be a new intern, and something that I never was really told in the getting a job process, because you learn so much information about how to interview well, how to, answer coding questions in the interview, and I learned all that. But what no one ever told me was what it feels like when you actually are an intern at the company and you're confronted with all this new information at once. It is an opportunity for a lot of like emotional obstacles, especially things like imposter syndrome, to come up. So I decided it would be a good idea to make a talk about what it's like to overcome those obstacles and what things you can do when you're in that moment, because you've done all this preparation. Now you're there. What can I do to actually still succeed here, even though there's a lot of things that feel like maybe I wasn't prepared enough, maybe people like don't think I know what I'm talking about. In reality, you're just there to learn. So I want to talk about like the ins and outs of all those sort of emotional challenges that you can see.
Oh, that's an interesting talk. I think there's not too much about this, like an insight into this. So thank you for doing this. By the way, where you located? I pick up a Canadian accent.
Yes, I am. I'm in Ottawa right now.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, the little bit that I learned from TV, what is Canadian accent, I got it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a compliment. A lot of people say American, so I will definitely take Canadian.
No, I got the about.
Oh, no.
All right. So before we start, people in the audience, please, if you have questions, ask them in the Q&A. And if you want to chat, just use the chat function. This way, it's easier for us to manage them and bring the questions forward to the speaker. All right. Now, without further ado, Eleanor, the stage is yours. Take it away.
Okay, perfect. So hi again, everyone. As you heard, my name is Eleanor, and my topic is going to be how to fail successfully, which is my way of talking about overcoming your fear of failure as a software engineering intern. So as we talked about, I am currently a full stack software engineer at a company called Fellow, based here in Ottawa, Canada. Before starting full-time work, which I've been doing for about the last year and a bit at Fellow, I was an intern. And so the experience of being an intern is still very fresh with me. I'm still familiar with what that feels like. And before then, I was an intern at 3 other tech companies, which means that I've had that experience of many new starts with different companies and their various code bases. So it's been my experience that being that new employee at a new company with all this new information coming in, it's a common situation for imposter syndrome to set in, as well as various other emotional obstacles. And right now, I'm still very early in my career. There's not really anything in tech that I would consider myself an expert in, except maybe talking about imposter syndrome and this intern experience, because I've gone through it so many times. And this even includes preparing this talk for you today. I have imposter syndrome talking about my experience as an expert in imposter syndrome. So it can take a lot to get over this, but let's talk about it together. So also to define our terms, in case you're unfamiliar with this, what is imposter syndrome? It is the fear of being found out. It's the idea that somehow you have convinced everyone around you that you are much more qualified than you actually are. And the truth of being an intern or a junior developer is that your entire role is just to learn as quickly and as well as possible. You're not expected to be super, super qualified. However, the only way that you can get to that position where you are super, super qualified is by learning quickly. But in the position of learning, you are going to have to overcome quite a few things. And things like asking for help, you're going to probably make a lot of mistakes, and you're going to have to get used to the idea of saying, I don't know something. However, these can all be really, really difficult to do. And they can feel like personal failures, as if you're admitting that, yes, everyone was right, I am underqualified, and my imposter syndrome won. So that's why I call overcoming this feeling of these are personal failures, that's why I call that failing successfully. So let's back up for a second and talk about what it's like being an intern. And the reason I want to talk about this is that I think it's important to get some insight into that. I know a lot of the spectators here today are students, but if anyone's watching who is a manager or a senior developer, I think it's important to get a little bit more context of what it feels like to be an intern in that moment. So again, this is my personal experience. It's not across the board. But when I was in school, I worked really, really hard. I didn't love being in school. Like I don't thrive being a student, but I still worked hard so that I could get good grades, so that I could get a good job. And I studied really hard for the interviews. I did all the problems, like the LeetCode code problems and all this preparation that you can do. And through getting good grades and doing all this preparation, it led me to believe that I know a lot. Like I can talk about software, like I have things to say. However, when I would show up to jobs on the first day, sometimes you're not familiar with every single piece of technology that a job uses. You're limited to the range of technology that your employer uses, which means that you can't necessarily show them absolutely everything that you're capable of. For example, when I started at my current job, I had lots of experience with like Java and C# and Python, but I'd never actually worked that much with React. I hadn't done that much straight React web development. And so when I arrived on my first day, I had to start building React components. And all of my knowledge from 5 years of software engineering was now narrowed down into the idea of whether or not I could build a good React component. And the truth of it was, I really couldn't. And so that was how imposter syndrome started to set in, is that I started to doubt the skills that I was pretty sure that I had, but now that I couldn't portray that to anybody, I started to doubt myself. Something that is really important from a management perspective is having meaningful intern projects. And in my degree, I did a business minor. I am not an expert in business whatsoever, but I remember learning about this theory, theory X and theory Y in management. And it's the idea that people will work the way they are expected to. So if you are super micromanaging someone and you don't give them that much room to explore their own ideas and you tell them how to spend every minute of their day, people will perform at that level. They will perform to the degree that you are expecting them to. But on the other side of that, if you give people more freedom to pursue their own ideas and set their own schedules and succeed at their own level, then that is the level that they will perform at. They will meet your expectations. And I think that that is very much the case for internships and specifically intern projects. And when I say the quote unquote intern project, I mean the meaningless tasks that interns can sometimes be assigned because employers don't necessarily want to trust them with too much responsibility. And I understand why employers do this. It makes sense that you wouldn't want just some 19-year-old coming in and messing with your whole product. However, I have experience being an intern in an entirely separate code base, separate database, everything really, really isolated. And in that internship, I learned almost nothing, which meant that it wasn't a very productive internship for any of us. And so the problem with being isolated in these meaningless tasks where you're not really feeling like you're contributing much to the overall product is that, first of all, in that isolation, you can't learn, like I said, you don't have any opportunity to bounce ideas off of other people because you're doing something so incredibly separate. And secondly, if you are experiencing imposter syndrome or anything to that degree, being assigned tasks that you know are meaningless and aren't giving you a lot of feedback about their usefulness really reinforces the idea that you aren't qualified. For instance, when I worked in this internship, I just felt like I was regurgitating existing knowledge that I already knew, and that no one trusted me to try anything different. So I got very little out of that internship. And if you're management, like I said, I understand the idea behind intern projects, but I think you can you can use that idea, but also allow interns to produce something useful and helpful to the overall product or project, whatever it is that you're doing. And the idea here is to make low urgency, high importance projects. So projects that if they go over time or over budget, it's not really a big deal. It's not a catastrophe if they have to take a little bit longer or something goes a little bit wrong. That's the low urgency part of it. But they're high importance enough that when the intern does complete it successfully, they do get a sense of accomplishment. And that does really, really help your imposter syndrome. So now that we've talked about what it's like being an intern, how can I turn around my fear of failure to failing successfully? First idea, asking for help. And I know this is something that can easily trigger imposter syndrome. I've experienced this firsthand. It seems simple, but it is something that I can easily get stuck on because I'm too afraid or I'm too proud or anxious to ask for help. And instead, I just get stuck in this state where I don't make any progress at all on a problem because I don't want to admit to anybody that maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And it's hard. It is really, really hard. Especially as an intern, no one should expect you to know everything. And I believe it's always better to ask for help and admit this, even if it's difficult, rather than make no progress at all and keep hitting those same walls. So the sooner you realize that you're stuck, the sooner you realize you're in this state, the sooner you can get help and move on. And then it's a win for everybody because you can continue making progress and producing good work. And you aren't stuck. You aren't stuck in this moment where you're so overwhelmed by imposter syndrome or whatever else you're feeling there. I have a story about this happening to me in my very first week at my current job. I got stuck when I was assigned some very basic tickets, and I was told these are just some simple tickets to get you acquainted with the code base. And I couldn't make any sense of the code at all, and I didn't even know where to start. And I assumed it was because I wasn't familiar with React, which, as I mentioned before, was something I knew was a shortcoming, and I was expected to do a lot of in this role. And when I was looking at this code, I seriously couldn't do anything with it. And I started to seriously doubt myself, especially because the other intern who I was hired with, I knew was very good at React. And he had mentioned that in his introduction, and we had talked about it. And so because of that comparison as well, I started to feel really, really worried. And the imposter syndrome was getting a really solid grip on me. And eventually, I was so stuck on this code, and I was making no progress. I came to the realization that the only way out of this was I was going to have to ask someone for help or clarification. And the best person to probably ask would be the other intern because we were working on very, very similar tickets. And this was very, very difficult for me to realize is admitting my imposter syndrome to someone who was at the exact same level as me and who the exact same thing was expected of. But I managed to swallow my pride, and I reached out to him, and to my surprise and relief, he was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, thank you so much. I'm also so confused. This code makes no sense. Let's work on it together. Here are some ideas." And I had some ideas. I had some like files that I had thought might be relevant, and together we sort of figured it out. And it was great because we managed to complete the work, And it really, really reduced my imposter syndrome to know that I wasn't, first of all, wasn't the only one feeling confused, but also that I was capable of completing the work. I was still able to do the job. I just needed collaboration with someone else in that moment. And that was completely okay. I still produced good work. So when you're an intern and you're in this position of being very, very stuck and embarrassed or worried that you have to ask for help, there's some things that can make this process a little bit easier. So first of all, I think it's really useful to present questions in the context of what you do know. So that's saying, hey, I'm getting this error message and I don't understand where it's coming from. I'm trying X, Y, and Z. I called this function. I think it might be because of this. These are all of the things that I know about the problem. Can you just provide me that one remaining puzzle piece that I'm missing? And by doing that, first of all, you are encouraging yourself, you're giving yourself confidence because you're saying, these are all of the things that I do know. I have so much context on the problem. So you're not, by saying that, you're not admitting I'm a complete failure because I can't figure this out. You're saying, I know so much, but there's something that I think I'm missing. Can you fill in that gap for me? As well, with the person who is helping you with this problem, it gives them a lot more context and you guys can solve the problem much faster because they're not left having to ask you a whole bunch of follow-up questions to figure out what's going on. And secondly, it's always really good as an intern to keep in mind that not everyone in software, or no one in software actually, knows everything about everything. And sometimes when you're very, very at the start of your career, it can feel like everyone is a lot smarter and a lot more qualified than you are. But that might be the case, but not everyone knows everything. You will still have the opportunity to learn so much. And there's been quite a few times that I ask people really weird questions. And even if they're very, very senior developers, they're like, yeah, that is absolutely a weird situation to be in. Let's look at it together. And secondly, if you're on the other side of that, if you're a team who is supporting an intern, I think this is underrated, but it is really, really helpful to encourage socializing and collaboration within a team. So that means like having lunch together, or just having chats and doing team activities. And again, this does seem underrated, but I think it's so much easier to ask someone a question if you have any degree of existing relationship with them, and especially if you consider them maybe a friend of yours, rather than having to approach a complete stranger and say, hey, I don't know what I'm talking about. Can you help me out? Secondly, when someone comes to you with a question, it's much more helpful for both of you if you can provide guidance rather than just a solution. So rather than just saying, okay, this code block, that'll fix it, go get to it. If you provide more guidance around that with like articles or docs or videos that explain why this is the solution, then that will actually help the intern or whoever's asking the question. It'll help them learn from that. And then it also means that you won't get asked the same question a week later, which is what would happen if you just send solutions off. They're not actually gaining anything from that. My next idea for failing successfully is making mistakes. And I know this is very, very scary for everybody, not just interns. And unfortunately, it is just the way it goes sometimes. The fear as an intern, especially for me, was the idea that I'm going to do something wrong. I'm going to make a big problem and everyone is going to find out that I'm not actually qualified for my role. However, the truth of it is that we're all human. We all make mistakes. And since we spend a lot of our time at work, there's a good chance we're going to make mistakes at work. So the best thing we can really do is how can we come to terms with this idea that mistakes are going to happen? I have a story about me making silly mistakes that I think about quite a lot when I'm in situations like this. I was at a cafe a while back getting a coffee, and when I got my coffee, I couldn't figure out which container the sugar was in. And so I took what I thought was the sugar and I started putting it in my coffee. And the barista who was watching me was shocked and they said, why are you putting salt in your coffee. And I was frozen in that moment. And instead of admitting that I had made this very simple, easily fixable mistake, I said, actually, I love salt in my coffee, because I was too proud. And then I sat down to have the nastiest drink I've ever had. And what makes me think about this quite a lot is that this was a very innocent, low stakes mistake. There was nothing really on the line. There were no major consequences if I had just said, oops, can I have a new coffee? Then I would have gotten a new coffee and everything would have been absolutely fine, except I would have felt a little bit embarrassed. And it was because of that feeling a little bit embarrassed that I had to deal with some pretty negative consequences. And so everyone makes these silly, silly little mistakes. And really the only thing that you can do in that moment is just see whether there are better potential consequences for you, and whether you can just smooth out the thing by maybe admitting that you made a mistake, or just acknowledging that a mistake happened and seeing whether you can move forward from that as best as possible. I don't really have any suggestions on how to just not make mistakes, because that's really unreasonable to ask of anybody. And so the best thing we can do is just try to learn from them, try to mitigate them happening. I think there's some things as management that do help give everyone a bit of peace of mind around the idea of making mistakes. And that's, first of all, not encouraging a culture of blame. I haven't worked anywhere like this, which I'm grateful for, but I think it's still worth saying that when, like, let's say a major bug goes out to production, then we shouldn't be pointing fingers. It shouldn't be the main goal to try to figure out who's to blame for this. It should be a collaborative effort to figure out how we can fix this issue and how to avoid it happening again. Secondly, I've always been very comforted by times that I've had managers who said that they had made mistakes in the past and who talked about silly things that they'd done or bugs that they'd created. And that has always been very comforting to me, because I can see that you can still have a successful career, especially in this company, after having done something silly like that. And you can still, have respect, and it doesn't completely destroy your career when you make a mistake like that. And finally, as software engineers, we have so many processes in development that can make mistakes less catastrophic when they do happen. And this is, maybe just testing or code reviews. We have so many things that sort of provide a little bit of a safety net so that the worst bugs don't happen. And I think we should absolutely make the most of these in order to give everyone that peace of mind around making mistakes. My next point is probably my most important one. And this is something that is really, really, really difficult when you are an intern and if you are experiencing imposter syndrome. And it does feel, I think, the most like a personal failure is just saying, I don't know. And this is something that I've struggled with a lot personally. And what's helped me is twisting the idea of saying, I don't know, from this acknowledgement of I'm underqualified, I don't know what I'm doing. Instead, when you say I don't know, if you can think of it as, okay, these are all the things that I do know. There is this area of everything that I know. And what we're talking about right now just happens to be outside of the boundaries of what I do know. And I know this seems very, very simple, but being able to sort of switch your perspective on saying I don't know has single-handedly been so important for me countering imposter syndrome. So if you can acknowledge all of the things that you do know and what you don't know, it might feel counterintuitive, because saying I don't know might feel like you're admitting that you're unqualified or unintelligent. But in reality, you are just figuring out the limits of your knowledge by defining everything that you do know. And once you've defined, again, this area of everything that you do know, it doesn't become, there's no morality involved. There's nothing there's nothing too serious when someone asks you something that you don't know about. You can be very transparent when you're discussing your code. If someone says, hey, did you know about this process, or did you know about this function? And you can say, oh, nope, that wasn't in my knowledge. That just happens to be outside of it. Thanks for letting me know. And now it is within my knowledge. You're not acknowledging any kind of defeat or failure. You're just being transparent. And also, once you are defining the things that I happen to know and that I happen to not know, imposter syndrome has a lot of trouble saying you're pretending to be someone that you're not, because you're not pretending anything. You're being completely honest, saying, I know this, I don't know that. As well, once you can more firmly decide what you do and don't know, you can look at what you don't know and learn a lot faster and say, okay, that's something that I need to add to my knowledge. Let's get on that. Let's learn it as quickly as possible. This idea, I think, is especially important when you are responding to questions, feedback, and criticism. And when I was starting out in my career, it is one of the scariest things to me when people would ask questions after I demoed my work. And so I was worried that people would either ask me questions that I didn't know the answer to, or they would point out things directly that I'd done wrong. And I was really, really scared of both of these scenarios. And so again, when you're in that moment and you have defined, okay, these are all the things that I do know, these are all the reasons why I made those decisions, because that was the knowledge that I had at the time. If you can be very solid in that and remember all of the reasons why you think you're right, then when you have to discuss things, when people give you feedback or they have criticism about your code, you're discussing your thought process. It's not, it doesn't feel like a personal attack. You can just say, okay, well, this is why I came to that conclusion. This is why I use this approach. Can you tell me why you think I should do it differently? And it becomes more of a conversation that's more curious, and you're collaborating to find a solution rather than someone telling you. It doesn't feel like someone's telling you that you did something wrong. You can just discuss it a lot more openly and be a lot more transparent, which is very, very helpful. So some things that have helped me as an intern get used to the idea that people might have questions or criticism is saying things like, can you clarify what you mean? And this might be really simple, but it helps a lot when someone asks a very confusing question. Maybe it is just a confusing question that was worded in a weird way. And so if you can follow up and say, oh, I'm not really sure what you're saying. Can you clarify what you mean? It helps a ton, because maybe they do clarify and you absolutely know the answer, or maybe you don't, and you guys can collaborate and figure out a better solution based on their question. Secondly, if someone presents you with information that you weren't super familiar with, you can say, oh, wow, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it like that. That is, again, very honest. You're being transparent about what you do and don't know. You aren't admitting any kind of personal failure. You aren't admitting that you're underqualified. You're just acknowledging their point, and maybe you will take it into account going forward. And finally, it is still a valid, transparent answer to just say, I don't know. It can be very hard to do that, but it is honestly the best answer in some scenarios. I used to be terrified of just saying, oh, I don't know. And so I would come up with some solution that kind of sounded right. If someone asked me a question, and I would sort of ramble for a while and hopefully say something that was kind of correct, and just hope that he wasn't, or they weren't going to ask me another question. But it's a much better use of everyone's time if you can just be upfront and say, oh, I don't know. And then maybe you will know and you can follow up with them. But in that moment, that is the honest answer. Something else to keep in mind when people come to you with criticism or asking you about your code is not always assuming that other people are always right. And this is hard as an intern because, like I mentioned before, when you're starting out, it can feel like everyone around you is super duper qualified and they know a lot more about what they're talking about than you do. But if you always assume and you always defer to other people's opinions, it can make it very difficult for you to make any progress yourself. A good example of this is coming across confusing code. So in my experience, I had a situation where I ran into some code that didn't make sense to me. I knew that we made API calls and that we didn't want to do these really expensive API calls too much. And so we would often cache the data that was returned from them. And I knew this pattern and I understood why we were doing this. But in one particular case that I came across in the code, we weren't doing it and I couldn't figure out why. And I just assumed, because I knew the code was written by one of the more senior developers, that I was just misunderstanding. And there was an obvious reason why we didn't cache the values there. And I should just accept it and move on and not embarrass myself by asking. But it did come up a little bit later. I was talking to the developer about something else, and we came across this file, and I pointed out and I said, oh yeah, by the way, we don't cache here. Can you explain why we do that? And he looked at it and he said, oh yeah, you're absolutely right. We should cache there. I must have just forgotten. And that was such an important moment for me because I realized that I had actually understood it correctly and that the code itself was just incorrect. And I could have improved it quite a while ago by just accepting that maybe I did know what I was talking about. And secondly, engineers do love to have strong opinions. This is a stereotype about engineering that I think is absolutely correct. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're experiencing imposter syndrome and you're maybe new to the job, it can be very intimidating when someone comes to you and says, you're doing this wrong, this is the right way to do it, this is the only solution, this is the only approach, is my way. So in those moments, if you can take a second and say, okay, is their approach genuinely better? Are they giving me good reasons why this is a better approach, why their idea is good? Then maybe I can take those into account. But it's also possible that they just wanted to say something loudly, they wanted to dominate the conversation. And in that scenario, again, it can really activate your imposter syndrome. So if you can instead just take everything that they say into account, it means that you don't have to defer to them entirely. You can use whatever feedback or ideas that they're presenting. It's quite likely that they are valid ideas, but you can take that into account. And again, if you're remembering everything that you do know and why you made those decisions, then it's very hard for someone to tell you that objectively you are wrong. They can suggest things to improve that, but if you remember that, then it's a lot easier to not get overwhelmed by these really strong opinions. And finally, I think it's really important to talk about underrepresented groups in tech whenever there's a conversation about imposter syndrome. And for me, this is being a woman in tech, I have that extra level of being afraid that I'm going to confirm whatever weird stereotypes people have about being a female software engineer. And so my imposter syndrome always has had that extra level to it. And I know it's the same for anybody else who feels like they aren't represented too strongly in software engineering. There isn't a solution to this that I can recommend right now. That would be a whole separate conversation. But I will say the one thing that has really, really helped me is having diverse representation in management. And for me, when I started my job here at my current job, my manager was female. And this was the first time that I experienced that in engineering. And that was so important for me, is having someone that I could identify with and look up to and see succeeding in their career and being assertive, all the while being part of someone who isn't represented properly in software engineering. And that was really, really important for me in overcoming my imposter syndrome and becoming more confident. So I also want to talk about whether I follow my own advice. I do try to follow my own advice as best as possible, as much as anyone can. I am always trying to seek opportunities to leave my comfort zone. So that includes doing talks for you today, or putting myself in situations where I have to challenge myself and challenge the ideas that I do know things and see whether I'm actually up to scratch. Something that I said was very, very important and I still put into practice is being transparent about what I do and don't know, and acknowledging when I don't know things and then realizing that I have to learn that. That has been so, so helpful, and just changing that mindset around saying I don't know has been so, so key to overcoming imposter syndrome. And finally, if you can get the idea of asking for help and clarification, get the idea that that isn't a bad thing, that is actually going to help you. Then that helps you overcome the idea that that's embarrassing and that it's not a big deal that you don't understand something. I have so many wonderful coworkers who have taught me quite a lot of things, and I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't been able to ask them for help and clarification many, many times. So finally, my takeaways from this talk, if you remember anything, remember that it's okay to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. You are probably going to make mistakes. That is also okay. The best you can do is just learn from them and move on. And finally, remember that saying, "I don't know," isn't an admittance that you are completely wrong. It's just a sign that you need to learn something, and that is also completely okay. So thank you very much. I can now answer any questions if there are any.
Again, the muted mic. Okay.
No worries.
Yeah, thanks, Eleanor, for the insights. This is certainly a very healthy way of looking at things, because I think it's easy to get lost in all of these, right? When you are like new into something, especially when you're maybe switching careers, right? And you are new to tech and you don't know, and then you feel overwhelmed, right?
Yeah,
all right,
absolutely.
we have a few questions from the audience. I will bring these forward to you. So the first one is how to start a journey to full stack. Hold on. How to start a journey to full stack development. Please tell us the roadmap and how long will it take. Okay, not sure if this is in the scope of your.
Yeah, I definitely can't say how long it will take you to get a job. I think that's different for everybody. But for full stack, I think the easiest thing is just to expose yourself to as many different languages as possible, because when you're working full stack, you are expected to know, databases, front end, back end. So like I was sort of talking about, getting used to the idea of learning and challenging yourself in different respects will help you become a really skilled full stack developer.
Yeah, this person is asking for a roadmap, and I think there is no like definite roadmap, right? I mean, there are so many different ways you can go into. I would just say take a look at a little bit of everything. Start with the basics, which is the front end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, what have you not, and frameworks, and then just go take a look at backend. But I think it's like a full stack roadmap is. I think it's unrealistic to just become just like that a full stack developer. I think it's something that just develops naturally.
Yeah.
Right? Like you start with one, either back end or front end, and then you are like, oh, what's over there? So I'm in back end, and I like what this React or Vue.js, whatever, is doing, and I will take a look at it, and then you play with it, and then bam, you're a full stack developer. So
yeah, exactly. Like having curiosity about other parts of the code is really helpful. You're right.
Yeah. So I think to who asked this question, a good way would be just start with one thing, become good at one thing, and then expand from there. All right. What else do we have? Do you think starting out with testing in a company is a good idea? Many people say it's good to learn the code of the company.
There's also something that I don't know whether I can really speak to. I have worked as a tester in the past, and I don't think it taught me too much about the actual code base, but I think that's entirely up to whatever the position is, like whether you're doing manual testing or whether you're like writing code for testing. I think the best way to learn the code that a company works with is just sort of like dive into it and start messing around with it. But I think it's probably going to be different for everybody.
Just start adding things, right? Or try to change something, right?
Yeah, and see what breaks and see what works, and just go from there.
But to the person that asked this question, if you want to to just start writing tests and see how it feels. I think just go for it. Maybe check. I don't know how new you're in the company. Just check with your manager if it's okay to write some code, some testing code, and just see how it feels. If you think you get to know the code base better, good. If not, there's other ways. Just as Eleanor said, just try try messing with the code and try to change things, add things, and so on.
Yeah, but testing is definitely a good mindset to have, like especially if you're writing new stuff, to understand all the possible inputs and outcomes of the code. It's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. All right. How can the tech industry as a whole promote a culture that values learning from failure and taking risks in pursuit of innovation? So I think this is again going a little bit into what you said with management, right? You need to have a psychologically safe environment, which is given by management.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about mistakes as, opportunities, I guess that's kind of a cliche. But when someone makes a mistake, let's say there's like a big bug that goes out, then clearly there was something that was lacking in the process around that allowed that to happen. And it isn't just one person who made a mistake that, caused the issue. So I think approaching mistakes as more something to learn from a management perspective, like you said, really helps people feel more comfortable with the idea of that. And yeah, maybe you can see that as taking risks in pursuit of innovation. That's something that I don't think is uncommon in software. I think people sometimes take big swings. But yeah, starting from a management place is definitely helpful.
Yeah, I think it also helps if you want to take a risk to pursue like some sort of innovation. I think it's good to sort of make a good pitch for it for management, right? Like, look, this is what we can do. These are the risks. These are the potential benefits. If this is something you want, I can spend 2 weeks on this and see how it goes. That's something I would do if I would be coding something that I would say, this would be like so good for us, but it's risky or it could break a lot of other things. But let's take a look at it. Okay, here is a long one. Okay, I will not I will not read it from there. I will read it from. I'm not a student, but I have just finished front-end web development bootcamp. Okay, I am looking to transition from healthcare assistant to software development. What channel would you advise me to get experience, apprenticeship or intern? So, okay, so basically it's very coming from a non-tech field to software development, basically how to get started, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure in Canada we don't do apprenticeships for software. It would just be internships. There are a lot of ways to get started. There's no one set path or roadmap like the other question asked. I think it's whatever works best for you. For me, I had already started a degree in software, and I'd started a degree in a different kind of engineering. I was doing civil engineering actually to start with, when I realized that it wasn't for me. But because I was already in the university environment, it made the most sense for me to finish a degree in software engineering. But I know that that's not everyone's path, and I actually have quite a few coworkers who didn't do engineering school. They went through community college, or they took courses other places. And for some people, that works best for them is maybe even you take courses online and you can have that sort of self-guided approach. So really just figuring out the best way for learning for you. And like we talked about, just being generally curious and wanting to learn, I think it's a really, really good mindset when you're getting into development, because then you'll have that motivation to be like, oh, that looks really cool. I want to build that. How do I get there? Rather than just being like, okay, I have to take this course and learn these things. If you just have ideas for like projects that you want to build, and then you research how to get that done, or you get someone to teach you how to do that, I think that's a really, really good way to get started. Plus, that's what everyone's going to ask you when you apply for jobs is what have you worked on? What projects can you show us? So I'd say maybe that's the best place to start.
Yeah. Also, like maybe getting a mentor, like looking for online for people or communities. Like I think like, being active in communities is always great because they're like you get talking and then before you know it, you're contributing to some open source project or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea.
Yeah, this ties a little bit into what Karol said earlier about open source. It's a great way to start if you don't have experience. All right, next question. Eleanor, love the presentation. My question is, how do you prepare for an interview? Any past rejections and takeaways?
Ooh. All right, so I do recommend studying for interviews, especially, I mean, I guess it depends what kind of interview it is. For technical interviews, you do need to study and there's lots of online resources to prepare for that kind of things, like LeetCode, and there's like some places that are like, these are the kind of questions Google asks or that Amazon asks. So it is kind of like studying for an exam in that you just need to really hone your skills. I have been rejected from jobs in the past, and I think it's because I tend to be a little bit scatterbrained in interviews, and I think it's a nerve-inducing environment for a lot of people. But if you can just try to keep in mind everything that you do know and that you're not, it's not that intense. Like the interviewers aren't trying to make you look bad. It's not like it's not that intense. Then it helps reduce some of those nerves and lets you think a little bit clearer there. I've definitely messed up and done silly things because I was just nervous in the moment. So if you are prepared enough and you are very set in your skills, then just try to focus on that instead. But I know that that's really, really difficult. Maybe the best way to prepare is just doing a ton of interviews. And that's what I did during university to try to get internships. I would do like 20 interviews in a year. And so after the first 5, I was so much more accustomed to the whole process that my nerves were a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, then you also come across more confident, like you know how it works.
Exactly.
You just walk in the door, hey, how is everyone doing?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. And that's made a huge difference.
Yeah.
I've had actually a lot of interviewers, and like not to enforce negative software stereotypes, but I had a lot of interviewers follow up with me and say, I'm so glad that we were able to just have a conversation, that you like asked how my day was, that you just like chatted, that you weren't just like frozen, like ready to talk about code. So having like some soft skills and being able to just like, yeah, they're people too. You can just like talk to them and yeah, make it a nice conversation.
Yeah, because usually when like you talk to an interviewer, these people are like meant to to just have a conversation with you, right? Like most of the times, maybe not always, but it's usually just you can just like talk. But I mean, it's easier said than done. Like, just don't be nervous.
Yeah, exactly. Like that feels silly. I'm not going to just say that because, first of all, I'd be such a hypocrite to say that. But yeah, it's also what I was told a lot when I was going through the interview process is that technical skills can always be taught as long as you have like the right mindset for it. But one of the main things they're looking for in interviews is whether you're going to be a good fit for the team and whether you're going to get along with the people there, because that's super important in any company, is just interpersonal skills and being able to communicate clearly with each other. So sometimes that's something that they're looking for even more than being like super, super skilled in one particular language or something.
So it's actually an excellent point. And I remember from another interview, someone saying exactly the same thing, like for junior developers or for interns or whatever, we're actually not looking for any technical skills because they will learn it here. They will have to learn it here.
Exactly.
We are looking more for like curiosity, culture fit, and that kind of stuff. So,
for sure.
So that's a good. Go ahead.
Like I mentioned, you can prepare as much as you want. Like you can be super proficient, let's say in Java, and then if you're interviewing for a position that only uses Python, then that's not of much use to you. So you need to figure out different ways to present yourself as still an asset to that company potentially.
Yeah. Also probably like human factors. You're super proficient in JavaScript and someone asks you something about JavaScript and then you sort of doubt yourself, or you something that you actually don't know, and then one thing after another goes wrong just for being nervous. Like
Exactly.
it's for example, I see it when I sometimes play online chess, right? And people play very good, and then there's one mistake, and then there is like bam, 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 2-3 mistakes after another.
Yeah,
Like
it's a snowball effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same. Like just if you stay like if you just have in mind like, okay, this is I give this a shot. These are only like regular people, and they are here just to talk with me. And I think it's like,
yeah.
I think
And
it's
that's
important to try to like sort of get your mind out of, oh my God, if I don't get this, what? You get the next one or the next one. Like
exactly.
there's no real bad consequences.
And I think that's been what my nerves have caused me to do in past interviews, is start to like doubt myself, and then I don't answer like the technical questions like that clearly, and I start to be like really confused and sort of rambling. But if you can just, explain, another thing is just explaining your thought process. And you're like, okay, well, that didn't work the way I thought it was going to work. This is what I was thinking was going to happen. This is what I want to do. Just having that, it's not all about just like whether you can execute something clearly. Sometimes it's just they're looking for so many other factors there.
Yeah. Like, for example, like people in interviews, like people that know a lot of stuff, like they're very knowledgeable about something. And you watch interviews of them and they jump like from one place to another and they don't end up not really answering something. For example, Gary Vaynerchuk.
I don't.
It's a like a media guru, and
okay.
Like, and in his interviews he's like answering something and then he's like having a side thought and then this and then from that a side thought, and like it's like very hard to follow, but at the end like he knows what he's talking about. So I think this is like one way to look at this one.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
I think we are rambling a little bit on. Like, let's just move to.
Okay.
I'm sorry for stalling everyone. Let's move to some more questions. What are most needed soft skills in your opinion to be successful in the tech industry?
I think like we were just talking about, curiosity and just having that motivation to want to learn things and want to figure out why things work the way that they do is really, really important. And that's what drives so much of tech, is just people saying like, oh, can we do that? Let's see. So I think if you count curiosity as a soft skill, that's definitely a big one. Also just being like open to feedback. Again, what I was talking about in my presentation, like that can be really, really hard, but not feeling too defensive about your code and acknowledging that there are probably better ways to do things. I think just sort of having that peace of mind that like, okay, this is the way I built it. This is why I built it, but maybe people have better ideas and I'd love to hear them. Again, because curiosity, can I do this a better way? That would be really great if I could.
Yeah. And always people skills are.
Yes.
Like if you know how to talk to people, it's always a great skill to have.
Yeah, 100%.
Not sure how to practice that though. I'm not an expert on this, but I just know that it helps a lot.
It does. And it helps also, like I was talking about, it helps when you need to ask someone a question. And even if, you haven't worked with someone before, if you have some kind of rapport with them, like you've chatted with them over coffee in the office, then it makes it a lot less scary to have to approach them and be like, hey, I messed up, I'm having this error, like what's going on, as opposed to someone that like you've never spoken to, because that can be so intimidating.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like you have to introduce yourself. Oh, hey, I'm this and this, I'm new here, I work in this department, I'm working on this, hey, I have a question. And it's like
it is like
yeah. All right, let's go to the next one. How can colleagues and managers best support new interns who may be struggling with failure and self-doubt?
Yeah, so I talked about that a bit in my presentation, like how to create projects that are still meaningful for interns without them feeling like they're being sort of shoved off to the side. I think that's really, really key. Also just encouraging a lot of collaboration. That was something that was really, really good for me, is that my manager very much encouraged us to talk to each other, like what we were just saying, like soft skills, and feeling like I had a really good team that was like eager to support me and wanted to see me succeed. That was really, really helpful for me in my position right now. And also just like encouraging, the idea of trying new stuff, and what we were saying about avoiding mistakes. Like, it's okay, just encourage people to try things, and if they fail, then they fail, but it's not a big deal. You can still succeed as long as you have that drive to keep learning.
Yep, definitely. Okay, let's go to the next question. How to manage stress and feeling paralyzed by anxiety as an intern?
That's a good question.
Whoa, paralyzed anxiety. Okay, and remember all the new information.
I don't know if I'm definitely not like a counselor or someone who can talk too much about like the best ways to manage stress. You are confronted with a lot of new information that definitely can be very anxiety inducing. But if you can remember that as an intern, I did this one time on a job. They asked me to build a REST API. This was like my first internship in like second year university, and I only knew, I think, Angular. Like that was the only thing that I could write in. And they were like, yeah, build a REST API. I was like, yes, absolutely, I can do that. And it took me like a month before I summoned up the courage to be like, I don't know what a REST API is. And because I was so scared that they were going to find out that I didn't know what I was talking about. But they had given me a lot of information. So instead of just sort of being in your own head about, oh my God, I have to prove myself, I have to show myself in a certain way, if you're just sort of open to the idea that you're going to learn a lot of things, they're going to ask you to do things that you don't understand, then it makes it a lot less high pressure, and you can ask the same questions again. I know it feels embarrassing if someone tells you something and you're like, wait, I don't understand that. Can you repeat that? But I do that all the time. Like to this day, I'll be like, yeah, I know we talked about this in the last meeting, but I don't get it. Can we go over it again? And it can be really anxiety inducing to do that, but really that's the only way you're going to understand what's going on. So
yeah, these are some great tips. Yeah, just try to look at like when you come to a new company, like it takes like a year for a developer to become proficient in the code base. So
yes.
You can't know everything when you arrive. I think that's, if you have that in mind, you're good to go. Okay, what's your feeling about the current Canadian market for interns, trainees, developers?
I don't know, again, if I'm the most qualified person to answer this. If you want to come to Canada, we'd love to have you. It's a great place here, although the winters are a little cold. Canadian tech is pretty decent. We do have some companies here, like especially here in Ottawa, we have Shopify, and there's a whole bunch of there's actually a decent startup scene, especially in Ottawa and Ontario. So if you're looking to try like smaller companies, I'd say there's definitely a lot of opportunity there. But I don't actually know who's hiring the most in the current job market, and especially Canada compared to anywhere else. I'd say just figure out what you're interested in and see who's hiring. If you're open to relocating, then go wherever you want.
Awesome. All right. So we are coming to the end of our time again, and that might have been my fault. There are some more questions. So where can people find you, Eleanor?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Ellie Rumsey, or you could message me on LinkedIn, which is also just my name. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to find me.
Okay, so if your question hasn't been answered here, just reach out to Eleanor. I'm sure she would be happy to answer any remaining questions.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been a
And
great
with
time.
that, thanks a lot, Eleanor, for your insights and for joining us here all the way from Canada, and wishing you a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Bye. All right, so that was our second speaker, and the next speaker is Catherine. She is developer advocate at Process, and she's going to talk a little bit about design, like what can you achieve when you are good at designing. And maybe she says that you think you're not good at designing, but maybe that's not true. Maybe you are good. And let's find out more about that. Welcome, Catherine.
Hey there. Thank you so much for having me.
How are you, Catherine?
I'm doing well, thanks. How about you?
Good. Thanks. Well, it's very lovely having you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Awesome.
Oh, go ahead.
So
Sorry.
tell us. It's okay. So tell us a little bit about what are people going to learn from your talk today?
Yeah, so I've found that a lot of developers have some kind of nervousness around design, and yet we are forced to make design decisions just as part of our work. So my hope is to kind of give you the foundational design knowledge that you need so you can feel a little bit more confident making some design decisions, and maybe if you work with a design team, improve your communication and collaboration with them as well.
Awesome. Looking forward to your talk. Then without further ado, Catherine, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. As I was just so wonderfully introduced, my name is Catherine Grayson-Nans. I am a developer advocate for Kendo React at Progress. But in fact, that was not what I was always planning to do. I actually have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in studio arts. I went to school to become a graphic designer, and I did. I worked in ad agencies for many years afterwards, doing all sorts of design work. But slowly, graphic design turned into email and web design, which turned into email and web development, which turned into UI and front-end development. And here I am. I could probably fill a whole another session just talking about the experience of transitioning between those roles and why and how. But I really only bring them up today to give you a little bit of context on why I'm here talking about design. These days, I really like to live in the world between design and development. I have sought out jobs and opportunities that support me continuing to work with like a foot in each world. And I can't imagine never designing again any more than I can imagine never developing again. I love both of those experiences so much. However, as someone who has had that experience in my career, I've also gotten to see firsthand the way that so many developers can really struggle with design. And that could be in the form of difficulty collaborating with the design team, or frustration trying to work on an app or a side project of their own, or even just those little design decisions, things like choosing the right color for a button, or determining the right amount of padding, or fitting a new feature into an existing layout. Those kind of things that slip through the cracks and become developer problems, even though they might technically be design problems. And when you don't know much about design, even those little tiny choices can feel very overwhelming. I can't count the number of times I've had a developer show me something and be like, it just doesn't look right, or I can't make it look professional. They can identify that there's something wrong, but they cannot figure out why. And it's like trying to solve a riddle in another language. The problem itself is one thing, but on top of that, you don't even have the words to describe it. So that's really what I'm hoping to offer you in this talk, is a kind of Rosetta Stone for understanding the world of design by learning some of the fundamentals and giving you the language to talk about it. Enough knowledge for you to identify what is happening in your designs and why. But first, there is a myth about design that we will need to debunk before we go any further. And that is the idea of having the eye. There's this assumption that design, or really any kind of artistic talent, is something that you're just born with. And if you don't have that natural gift, then you're just out of luck. This, frankly, is completely untrue. Design is a science, and it's based on what we know about how our eyes and our brains process the world. Once you have a grasp of those fundamentals, you can create designs that naturally align with how humans interpret information, or as we call them, good designs. So even if you're not looking to learn everything about art and design, you can still build up a skill set that enables you to understand what makes a design good and then start to replicate that in your own work. So all that being said, probably time we start doing some of that learning, right? So let's get into it. Welcome to Foundations of Design. Today we will be talking through the basics of color, layout, and typography. I will be your professor, and I promise it will be less painful than the lectures that I had to sit through in college. Plus, you don't have to sit on those weird, uncomfortable metal stools that they put in every art classroom for some reason. So you've already got that going for you. First things first, color. There's a lot to talk about here. How colors work, how we talk about them, how our eyes make sense of them. So let's start with something a little bit more familiar as a jumping off point. RGB color. When we are working with colors on the computer, we are working with an additive color system. That means that when all of the colors are combined, the result is white. This happens anytime we're dealing with colors from light, so like a screen or the projector at a movie theater. And that's why when we code the RGB value for white, it's RGB 255, 255, 255, right? It's all three values turned all the way to the max, combined together to create pure white. On the other hand, colors from pigment work on what's called a subtractive system, which means that the colors will create black when they're all combined. You can think about like food coloring or paint as a good example of the subtractive system. The more you add, the darker it gets, eventually turning black. As you can see here, the RGB and CMYK models are the same colors. They're just kind of flipped. And that's the difference between adding and subtracting to create color. Practically, this means that things we design using an RGB color mode will inherently look a little bit more bright and vibrant, because remember, it's light-based, whereas printing with CMYK colors is going to get you truer, deeper darks. Since we're focused on UI design here, we're going to go ahead and set CMYK aside and focus the rest of our attention on RGB. So each one of these little boxes of three colors is a pixel. And when we define a color using the RGB method, that's what we're defining. From a distance, our eyes will blur all those little subpixels and pixels together to create everything that we see on a screen. In fact, this is actually a very old technique. Long before there were screens and pixels, there was pointillism. This painting is Seurat's A Sunday on La Grande Jatte, and from a distance, it looks pretty much like any other painting. But if you were to get right up close to it, put your face right up near it, or at least as close as you could without getting kicked out of the museum, you'll see that it works the same way that pixels do, or pixels work just like this. This approach was part of a broader movement in art history called post-impressionism, which of course followed impressionism because it turns out naming is hard everywhere, not just in programming. Post-impressionist artists were really curious about light and color and how the human eye interpreted them. You can see those same kinds of like short, quick brushstrokes across other paintings of the same period. So things like Monet's Water Lilies or Van Gogh's Starry Night. This approach is completely dependent on how our eyes interpret the colors based on the colors that are next to it. And I can imagine right now you're kind of thinking like, okay, neat trivia, but what does this have to do with user interfaces? Well, in fact, this knowledge of how our eyes and our brains interpret color really helps us understand the influence of context in colors. And as we can see demonstrated by those paintings and the way that the pixels work, our understanding of color is based almost entirely on the other colors around it. See, at first glance, the two small squares here seem to be different colors. But in truth, they are exactly the same. Just depending on which background color it's paired with, our eyes will perceive the color of the smaller square differently. Having this kind of contextual awareness is huge when it comes to making color choices for our user interfaces, because a color that looks one way in isolation might look completely different when it's put into a layout and surrounded by other colors. In fact, that's often where people struggle most, putting different colors together to create themes and color schemes. Choosing one color, it's not so hard, right? But choosing 4 or 5 colors that will all play nicely together, that's a little bit more challenging. But before we can talk about creating color schemes, we do need to stop for a minute and talk about the color wheel. Chances are you have seen a color wheel at some point before, even if it was just the last time one of your apps crashed and you got the spinning wheel of death. This, however, is the much more pleasant Johannes Eden color wheel, which does a fantastic job of demonstrating that relationship between the primary colors, the red, yellow, and blue there at the center, with everything else. Because when you combine primary colors, the result is a secondary color, which you can kind of see in that next level out, the orange, green, and purple. Mixing a secondary color with a primary color results in a tertiary color, which you can see along that outer ring in between the primary and secondary colors. Now, when we are talking about a color's actual color, we're talking about its hue. That's the thing that makes us describe a color as green as opposed to yellow or red. But hue is in fact just 1/2 of a color, because there's also value. Value is the lightness or darkness of the hue. It's what creates the difference between something like sky blue and navy. You can change the value of a color in 3 ways: by adding white, adding gray, or adding black. When you add white to a hue, it's called a tint. Adding gray creates a tone, and adding black creates a shade. Colors can be broadly categorized into 2 sections, warm and cool colors. Even without really digging into this, you can probably already kind of guess how this works, right? Your warm colors are going to be your reds, oranges, yellows, browns, all that stuff that kind of evokes feelings of physical warmth, of sunlight. Whereas cool colors are your blues, greens, purples that we associate with feelings of coolness or of night. Beyond the realm of pure physical sensation, we also extend these warm and cool feelings into their connected emotions. So warm colors tend to evoke happy, energizing, passionate, exciting kind of emotions, whereas cool colors are a little bit more somber, and we associate them with relaxation, steadiness, trustworthiness, or knowledge. When we understand the color wheel, we have a tool to visualize the relationship that colors have with each other, and we can use the color wheel to know which colors will work together and which won't. When putting together a color scheme, I suggest starting by choosing one main color, right? And if you don't already have a brand color that you're working with, choosing between a warm or cool color is a great starting point, and then narrowing it down to one that feels right for your project. Then I recommend using one of the 4 major types of color schemes: monochromatic, analogous, complementary, or triadic, which we will talk about in more detail in just a minute, to expand that color into a full palette. A color scheme does not have to fit exactly into one of those 4 types to be good, but these are tried and true methods to create color groups that you know will always work. So it's kind of nice to have them on hand. Let's take a quick look at these 4 color schemes, as well as some example user interfaces that use them. First is the simplest, monochromatic. As you can probably guess, monochromatic uses the tints, tones, and shades of only a single hue to create depth and variation. This is a really easy one to reach for because you only need that one color. The downside is that it can be a little harder to make elements stand out, and you might feel that lack of variety while you're working. This piece, Mark Tanzi's Forward Retreat, is a great example of a painting using a monochromatic color scheme. Emotionally, monochromatic color schemes can feel very intense. That's because repeated elements create urgency and emphasis in a design. And this happens in everything, right? If you were to underline something several times, or when people repeat a word when they say no, I'm really, really gonna do it. It's an indication of intensity. Repetition is a tool in our design toolbox that we can use in multiple ways to tell the user, this is really important. And if we're talking about monochromatic UIs, we got to mention Facebook, right? Because Facebook is blue, blue, blue all the way down. And we only very occasionally see other colors in the case of errors or informational warnings. A similar color scheme is the analogous color scheme, which uses colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. This tends to be my recommendation for complete design newbies because, like a monochromatic color scheme, it's really intuitive and it's pretty hard to mess up, but it does have the advantage of giving you a few more colors to play with, so you kind of get the best of both worlds. In the wild, a good example of the analogous color scheme is BP, which uses the green, and yellow, and it stretches right across that section of the color wheel like a perfect arc. Now we start to branch across the wheel a little bit. Complementary color schemes use colors that are exactly opposite to each other on the wheel. So when we start thinking about color pairings, these are ones that most of us can reach for pretty naturally, right? Things like Christmas colors, red and green, or orange and blue. It's very popular and very common for some reason in movie posters. And if you want to talk about blue and orange in the UI, of course we have Amazon. They have this orange arrow that has been in their logo for ages. It has really strong brand identification, so they're not going to want to change that. But orange is a really hard color to use in a UI. It's difficult to make a bright orange accessible, and it's easy for it to start to feel really bright or loud or just kind of visually overwhelming. So they opted for a complementary scheme here, and that allows them to use their brand orange without necessarily making it the main event. Design-wise, this is a super smart, very practical trick, and if you ever find yourself struggling to design around a difficult color, maybe try looking across the wheel. Last on our list is triadic. As you could probably infer from the tri in the name, this color scheme has 3 main colors that are equally spaced from each other and create a triangle across the color wheel. A great example of this is our primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Vermeer's Girl with the Pearl Earring painting uses this color scheme. You can see it in her red lips, her blue wrap, and her yellow clothes. In a less fine art example, let's take a look at the Pepsi website. Yellow is not one of their brand colors, but you can tell that this designer knows their color theory because yellow is really naturally incorporated in all their photos and accent colors to help offset that blue and red. This is another great tip that you can steal. Don't forget images and illustrations. Oftentimes we are super focused on the structural parts of the UI, right? We're talking about buttons and menus and like sections on the page, and we're not really thinking about the images yet. In fact, when we wireframe things, a lot of times you just get like a big box with an X to designate image here, and you don't think any more about it. But the image is actually super important. If you were to remove or replace these images from the Pepsi website, it would look fine. But these specific images with the yellow highlights really bring the whole thing together and make it shine. The last thing I want to touch on is color and accessibility. So first, make sure that you're always running colors that you've chosen through an accessibility checker to see which ones are safe for text or other important information. The color checker in this screenshot is the Adobe Color Accessibility Checker, which is one that I really like. Another thing worth considering when it comes to color is high contrast themes. You might have seen these before. They usually use like a pure black background color and then bright neon colors for the rest of the palette. And you might find it kind of visually jarring or unpleasant, but pleasantness really isn't the goal here. These themes are purely an exercise in readability. The example shown here is one of the Windows operating system high contrast themes, and you can see that the colors they've chosen stand out very starkly from the black background. So if you're creating color themes for an application UI, it's worth considering adding a theme like this in addition to your standard or maybe dark mode themes. All right, now that we have talked about colors, let's start to talk a little about the actual elements on the page. In order to do that, we need to talk a little about the human brain. The brain is actually very cool. There is a lot that we still don't know about it, which in and of itself is also very cool, I think. But one of the things that we do know is that our brains love categorizing and organizing. It is how we try to make sense of the absolute deluge of sensory input that we get every single day. It is an incredibly natural human desire to group similar things, to try and simplify and condense the wide variety of the world around us into something that we can understand, right? It's our way of trying to make order out of chaos. And this might all sound like, philosophical abstractions, But in reality, this inherently human trait has a huge impact on our designs. Because when we look at a design, we will attempt to sort the elements on the page into an order that allows us to digest the content. When we've created a layout that doesn't look good, it's often because we are unintentionally working against these organizational methods. Once we have a better understanding of how the brain sorts things, we can align our designs with those methods and make them a lot more intuitive. Leveraging these organizational rules is kind of like a shortcut for design that will help your users get to the place you want them to go, but faster. Like color, there are scientific principles of layout you can use in order to align your work with how the brain organizes stuff. One of the most popular of these is Gestalt theory. Gestalt theory identifies 6 main patterns that humans use to group and make sense of information: similarity, closure, continuity, proximity, figure ground, and symmetry. Some will also include a 7th pattern called common fate, but these will make a lot more sense if we look at some examples, so let's take a look. Similarity means that we will naturally assume a relationship between similar elements. For example, here our brains organize these shapes into horizontal lines. There's no reason really why we should do so, right? These are all equally sized and spaced elements, except that the shapes and colors are the same horizontally, so we assume there has to be a relationship there. Closure means that humans will naturally try to fill in any missing gaps or spaces. So here in this example, we see a square and a diamond, despite the fact that there is no square or diamond actually present, only these little Pac-Man shaped wedges. We infer the square and the diamond by mentally closing the gaps. Continuity means that the viewer's eye will continue along the same unbroken path through a design unless it is actively interrupted. It's a little bit similar to closure in that both have to do with how the eye moves and how it follows that invisible line. But while closure has to do with the line itself, continuity has to do with when that line is interrupted or not. Proximity means that we naturally group items that are placed closely together. So in this example, we group the 2 left-hand elements into a single vertical column because they're closer to each other than they are to the right-hand element. Figure ground refers to our attempt to impose our 3D understanding of the world onto 2D objects and designs. Because we are so used to functioning in 3 dimensions with a sense of depth, we naturally identify things that are closer to us as being a little bit more relevant, and therefore the subject or the figure, while everything else kind of gets relegated to background. On screen, of course, there is no literal depth, right? But we can create the illusion of depth in our designs by using value changes. That allows us to prioritize certain elements by establishing them as the subject. Symmetry captures our natural sense of balance. We really want things to feel equal, and when they don't, it can feel unsettling and off-putting. This comes from very old human instincts, where something that was off balance was structurally unstable and therefore potentially dangerous. Symmetry does not always have to be perfectly exact the way that this example is, but it does mean that we're going to seek out and feel reassured by visual balance in designs. And we will talk a little bit more about balance in just a minute. Finally, we have common fate. This one doesn't make it in every list because it's often more related to animation than static design, but it is worth a quick look. It's kind of a combination of proximity and continuity. When elements are placed closely together and have coordinated movements, we think of them as a single element, kind of like a school of fish. So obviously, as noted, this is a little less useful for static designs, but this is incredibly useful if you're doing any kind of UI animations. Now that we have an understanding of why and how our brains attempt to organize things, we can combine that knowledge with visual hierarchy to create interfaces that capture and direct our users' attention. Visual hierarchy is the practice of creating contrast in your design by combining the use of size, placement, and color to manipulate the visual weight of each element and help your most important elements stand out. This gives you control over the balance of the page and the order in which your users will notice each element. When you look at a new design, what do you notice first? Where are your eyes drawn? These things aren't left to chance. We as designers can control them by creating a visual hierarchy. Playing with size is one of the fastest and easiest ways to do this, and in fact, you probably already do it, because one of the most common examples of this is the H1, H2, H3 HTML heading system. When you make one word or sentence much larger than everything else on the page, the viewer's eye will begin there, almost regardless of whatever else is happening in the design. So let's take a look at this in action. I feel obligated to begin by saying that word clouds are not really great designs. That being said, they are an excellent demonstration of using size and scale to create a visual hierarchy. In this case, our eyes are immediately drawn to that word education, despite the fact that it's in the lower right corner, which is usually the place our eyes go last as we scan a layout. After that, the next things that jump out at us are those mid-sized words, school, family, etc. A pretty good rule of thumb here is to make sure that your most important element is the largest one on the page, and then set the relative size of your other elements based around that in order of relevance. One of the most intuitive ways to create a hierarchy is to put the most important items at the top and then work your way down. You might have heard people talk about putting items above the fold before. This is a little bit of an outdated term that was based in newspaper design, where top stories would go on the front page above the literal fold, so buyers could see them at a glance when they went by a newspaper stand. The idea of the fold stuck around for a little bit into web design, referring to the content that was visible on first load. But now that screens come in all shapes and sizes, it's pretty much impossible for us to guess where the fold will be for any given user. There's also a lot of data we have now that shows scrolling has become a very natural behavior for users, so people will rarely open a page and then immediately leave without scrolling at all. All of that to say, the fold should no longer be a determining factor in your designs. However, that core idea behind a newspaper layout is still accurate. You want your most important information at the top of the page, and then you want to work your way down in order of prioritization. So, as we can see in this example, the most important information is at the top, right? We have the logo, the name of the newspaper, the breaking news headline. Then the text will get kind of progressively smaller as we move down the page, combining size and placement to indicate its relative importance. The last piece of the visual hierarchy puzzle is color, right? Give me just a minute. I lost my place. Color is a little bit different because, as we talked about, it shifts depending on the context, and how it's interpreted depends entirely on the colors around it. So, as you can see in this example, the contrast in value between the background color and the color of your element impacts the visual weight of the element, and by extent, its place in the hierarchy. What you're looking for with color is that high contrast in value. You want a darker color in a sea of lighter colors, or a single color in an otherwise monochrome design. You can also really quickly and easily tap into that differentiation by using a complementary color scheme, like in the Spotify website example. Blue and orange are polar opposites, so using that large, heavy blue text over the pink and orange background really makes it pop off the screen. You can use this to your advantage in UI design, but always remember, color cannot be the only tool you use because it's not accessible to all your users. Your users that are blind or colorblind or in other ways struggle with vision won't necessarily be able to interpret all of your colors accurately. So you might be able to get away with using just size or just placement to differentiate an element, but color is a different ballgame. You always want to combine color with size, placement, or both in order to guarantee an accessible design for your users. The other piece we need to take into account when we're talking about layout is balance. Visual hierarchy involves using size, color, and placement to create those different visual weights. But balance is achieved by evenly distributing that visual weight across your composition. The idea of balance is something that, again, is really deeply ingrained in the human experience. We had to master balance in order to walk, to stand upright, to avoid danger, to build stable structures. Because of all those things, balance is something that we really strongly associate with safety and comfort. Looking at balanced things is reassuring, whereas looking at unbalanced things can make us feel a little bit uneasy or tense. The same associations carry over when we're talking about balanced and unbalanced designs. And as UI designers, we really don't want the viewer to feel uncomfortable, right? An artist might choose to intentionally leverage that tool to evoke an unsettled feeling in the viewer, but it's pretty rare for us to want users to feel that when they look at our applications. So in order to achieve balance, things need to be equally weighted on either side of a center vertical axis. Visual balance works pretty much exactly the same way that physical balance does. It's just that we're measuring visual weight instead of physical weight. But if you were to imagine the two halves of your design like a seesaw or a set of scales, it might help you get that feel for visual weight. So let's look at an example. Which side of this would you say is visually heavier, right? The side with the larger square or the side with the smaller square? If you guess the side with the large square, you would be correct. Even though these squares are the same shape and the same color, the larger size of the left one gives it a heavier visual weight. This creates an unbalanced design where one part feels visually heavier than the other. Most of the time, you want to create interface designs that feel balanced, like this example. The easiest way to do this is through symmetry, which is perfectly mirroring two sides of a design. These squares are symmetrical, exactly the same on the left and right, so that they feel perfectly balanced. Symmetry is an especially good solution when you're going for a very streamlined, sophisticated look in your design. You'll see this approach used a lot for brands that want to communicate kind of luxury, right? Because it creates feelings of strength and permanence and stability. It's perfect for when you want to communicate that something is not new or trendy, it's timeless or classic or peaceful, right? Balance does not always have to mean that elements are perfectly symmetrical, though. It just means that their visual weight is roughly equivalent. Asymmetrical balance is what we see most often and what we use most often when we're creating web and UI designs. Perfectly symmetrical design can be really beautiful, but it's also often impractical. It does not tend to be the most effective use of space because it demands that exact, precise mirroring, and we don't always get UI elements in perfect sets, right? The good news is that we don't have to have perfectly matched elements in order for them to be visually balanced. The visual weight of an element can be determined by a number of factors, including but not limited to the size, color, value, texture, or contrast of an element. Basically, you can balance anything with anything else as long as you have the ability to manipulate at least one or two of those things. A really common asymmetrical design pattern that we see in web design is the text and image balance. Tons of websites will have a homepage that follows the same kind of basic structure, right? There will be a header along the top, maybe a nav bar, and then immediately underneath there's a large image balanced by large text. You can also create asymmetrical balance through placement. Large items near the middle of a composition can be balanced by smaller items near the edge. And in UI design, we see this pattern most often with sidebars. A sidebar tends to be pretty dense. We got lots of menu items, icons, lots of elements, plus usually a different background color, which will draw the eye, give it a little further weight. However, sidebars take up much less space than the main panels, so that balancing act still works out. Thus far, we have focused primarily on the elements that we add to the page, right? Creating contrast, balance, and hierarchy between those elements to draw the user's eye where we want it to go. But the other equally important part of a design is where you don't put anything at all, the white space. White space gives our eyes a place to rest and our minds a chance to process. It's how we can either group or separate elements to create associations or prevent them. It's easy to get carried away while working on a design and go overboard. In fact, I would say that is probably the most common mistake that beginning designers make. There's this feeling that we started with a blank page and it's our job to fill it, so we just keep putting more stuff in there. But one of the main ways in which design differs from art is our need to prioritize function over form. In art, form is most important. It can also be functional. Art often, in fact, tells a story, evokes a feeling, or compels an action. But that function is secondary to how the artist has chosen to present the piece. In design, on the other hand, the function always comes first, even if that means making a choice that's less aesthetically appealing. When we're designing, every element on the page needs to serve a purpose. And often when you're finding yourself without enough white space, it's because we've added elements to our design that don't actually do anything to support the function. They're just creating visual clutter. Looking at a design without enough white space feels overwhelming, like this cruise.co example, right? There's no place for our eyes to rest. There's no clarity on what we should focus on first. So we're kind of being constantly distracted as we complete our goals. And it feels a little overwhelming and like kind of claustrophobic. In contrast, take a look at this New York Times homepage. This is still incredibly information dense, right? There's at least 5 major headlines in view. You have your trending topics, your navigation menus, your other website boilerplate, but it feels way less chaotic than the other example. Adding white space to your layout does not mean that you are sacrificing content. In fact, it's just the opposite. Your content will be far more effective if there's room on the page for your users to make sense of it. Finally, our last topic for today is typography. Type is incredibly powerful. We learn to read at a very young age, and from that point on, our lives are inextricably intertwined with this world of typography. Because of this, a lot of us can recognize bad type when we see it. After all, the goal is pretty simple. Type is meant to be read. If we can't easily read it, then it's a bad design. The question, as always, is the opposite. How can we create typography that looks good? Typography is a world all its own, and to dive into the depths, we actually need to start with a little history. Typography, the way we think about it today, the printing of letters by machine, not hand, actually begins with the printing press. Before the invention of the movable type printing press, type was printed using woodblock carvings. This was effective for making lots of copies of the same printing, but more limited in that you had to create a new carving for every new print job. Movable type revolutionized this approach by offering a full set of characters that could be moved around into different configurations and used over and over again for different jobs. Early movable type systems were found in China using clay and wood as early as 1088, but due to the greater number of characters and complexity in the Chinese language, this really wasn't a huge improvement over the woodblock carving system that was already in heavy use for them. Movable type wouldn't really catch on until around 1440, when Johannes Gutenberg invented his printing press in Germany using a system of metal character blocks and the much more limited Germanic language characters. The Gutenberg Bible was the earliest major book that was mass-produced using this printing press. The metal movable type printing press is important to be aware of because it was the origin of the art of typesetting, and the foundations of that are still very much in use today. In fact, a lot of the terms that we still use to describe aspects of typography came directly from this metal movable type system, so it's really helpful to have that background in mind as we go through some typography basics. A character is any single element. That could be a letter, a punctuation mark, a number. Thinking back to the movable type system, a character would be any single block of metal type. A typeface is a collection of characters in a specific style. And you already know them because you use them every day, right? Times New Roman, Calibri, Bodoni, Futura, so many more. A font, on the other hand, is a specific version of a typeface. Font and typeface are words that often get used interchangeably, but they're not really the same thing. For example, Futura is a typeface, but Futura Condensed would be a font. Calibri is a typeface, but Calibri Bold is a font. Oftentimes, we don't think of italics or bolding as a whole new font so much as like an effect that's being applied to a font, because that's how it feels now on the computer. But again, you have to remember those like drawers of metal type. And in those days, if you wanted to bold a single word, it meant you returned to your collection, you found the Bodoni Bold 12-point drawer, and you set just that word in a different font. Kerning is the space between two characters. Sometimes you want to give two characters a little bit more or less breathing room. This most often happens when the top of one character is wider than the opposite end, so like the A and V in this example that have a little too much space between them. Adjusting the space can make a word feel more cohesive, whereas neglecting your kerning can create gaps in words where you might not have wanted them, even going so far as to cause your readers to see one word as two separate words because there's too much space between them. It's something to be aware of anytime you're setting type, really. Tracking is similar to kerning, another couple of words that get regularly confused. But where kerning refers specifically to the spacing between two characters, tracking is a consistent amount of spacing between all of your characters. If you write a lot of CSS, you might know this better as letter spacing, since that's what the equivalent CSS property is called. Leading is the vertical space between lines of text. Originally, this term comes from the literal lead strips that would be used to separate lines of metal block characters when you set type by hand, as we can see in this example. These days, leading is measured in pixels or points and not lead strips, and CSS developers know it better as line height. Leading is one of those little things that makes a huge difference, and when your design is feeling cluttered or busy, a little extra leading can give everyone some breathing room. Here's a random group of words, right? Probably none of them words you would have associated with typesetting. Widows, orphans, and runts are all ways to describe various issues that happen with the way text is laid out on a page. So widows happen when the last single line of text gets separated from the rest of its related paragraph by a page break, or more often in UI design by a column wrap. An orphan is the reverse situation where the first line of text gets separated from the others. And runts are those little scraggly last words that wrap to the next line all by themselves. Removing all of these will make your text a lot easier to read. Rivers are a little bit weirder. They're what happens when you're unlucky enough for the breaks between words to line up over several lines of text. They create unintentional gaps in the text block that are distracting to your reader. You can fix them by adjusting your tracking or your word wrapping. You may have thought a dash is a dash is a dash, right? But that's where you're wrong. There are, in fact, 3 main types of dashes, and they all have different purposes. The hyphen is used to hyphenate multi-part words, things like mother-in-law or front end. Then there's the end dash, which is used to show ranges in numbers and dates, like June 10th to 12th. It's slightly longer. Finally, the em dash, which is the longest, and used to separate thoughts in a sentence, like so. Now that you know all of the terms and what to look out for, let's talk about one of the other type-related design choices that is most often agonized over by designers and non-designers alike: which typeface to use. While many typefaces might look similar at first glance, a closer look will reveal that they all have unique quirks and differences, kind of personalities. Just like people, a typeface can feel playful or serious or youthful or energetic or stodgy. And much like we've attempted to categorize various personalities through assessments like the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram, right? Remember, we have that very human instinct to try and group things. We've also grouped typefaces into various groups based on their high-level similarities and differences. There are many, many categories and subcategories of typefaces based on their style and usage, but I just want to talk about 4 of the most common here: serif, sans serif, display, and script. Serifs refer to the small decorative lines found on characters, usually at the top and bottom. And serifs confer a more professional, kind of an old school feeling to your type. They're often associated with tradition, legacy, and age. If you're going to be writing large blocks of text, a serif font can be a really great choice because the serifs create a more drastic and noticeable differentiation between the characters, and it makes them easier to read than sans serif fonts. Working in tech, however, you have definitely seen a sans serif font. Thanks to their clean and very modern look, they've become really ubiquitous in tech. It's a great choice for brands that want to communicate youth, trendiness, modernity, or technology. They also tend to look very clean and very sleek. Display typefaces do a great job of telling you exactly what they're for right in the name. These are typefaces that are a little bit funkier, a little bit weird, and best used for large display fonts and not for body copy. They are often incredibly distinctive, but sometimes to the detriment of their readability. They should be used with caution because they can add a huge burst of personality and fun and uniqueness to your design, but they will also call a huge amount of attention and require a pretty big font size. Script typefaces are also fairly self-explanatory. They mimic handwritten script. Some are going to be more stylized than others, and this also can include handwriting fonts that aren't technically like a script or cursive. Script fonts add a lot of humanity to your design. They're often used to communicate that something is homemade or artisan or otherwise very thoughtfully done. In a similar way to display fonts, you don't want to use these for your body text, although depending on the readability, you could maybe get away with using it for subheaders or like pull quotes, small blocks of text. As you can imagine, your options for a font are just about unlimited. And when you're faced with that many choices, it can help to ask some questions about what your end goal is. You want to make sure that whatever you're going to actually be saying with the font isn't working against the way the font itself looks. At a minimum, a typeface should support what you're communicating, but ideally it adds to it, reinforces it. Here are some questions you can use to start thinking critically about which typefaces will best suit your purpose. What is the primary message that you're trying to communicate with your design? How do you want the user to feel when they think about that message? What emotions do you want associated with it? Where and how will this typeface be used? Is this going to be large or small? Header or body text? If your text will be large, that could be your opportunity to use a more fun display typeface. Whereas if you know it's going to be small, the emphasis should be on readability. Will the user be close to the content while reading it, like on their phone, or far away, like presentation slides? You might be able to get away with a slightly less readable font for something that a user will see much closer. Is it more important for your design to feel human and emotional, or mechanical and precise? That can help you choose between serifs or sans serifs. Finally, how important is trust in this communication? Are you trying to present yourself as an authority or as a friend? This can also help you choose between serifs or sans serifs. Serifs naturally convey a lot of knowledge, education, tradition, and authority, where sans serifs are going to feel more casual, modern, youthful, and fresh. Okay, folks, we have covered a lot today in not a lot of time. This was kind of a speed run through design fundamentals, and I went through it as fast as I could to be respectful of everyone's time. But hopefully it provided you with enough insight to kind of get a feel for how and why design decisions get made. If you take anything away from this, I want you to know that design is not just random guessing. It is not trying things until they feel right. And it's not this kind of nebulous thing that you have to have an eye or a sense for. Design is a science-based approach to putting different elements on the page in a way that we have learned can evoke the response we're looking for in users, which honestly is so cool, right? Like that we have the ability to share information and influence emotions in this kind of way. Design is so powerful. And when we are leveraging these tools for our applications and our websites, we can make huge positive differences in the user experience. Knowing these foundations of design will put you in a strong position for both creating your own designs and collaborating with any designers you might work with. I hope that these words, these terminologies, these basics can help you collaborate and create work that is really exciting and innovative. Just make sure to only use your powers for good and not for evil. At least mostly not for evil. Maybe a little evil sounds fun, but just enough to be dangerous. All right. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thanks a lot, Catherine. That surely was a lot of content in a short amount of time. But it's great to have seen like the really basics. I think I'm lucky enough that I sort of have a good sense of design, but that also means that I never really learned design. So there's a lot of useful information here.
I'm glad.
Yeah, but let's get to some of the questions we got from the audience. What defines nicely looking together colors in a color scheme?
Mostly what we're looking for is just colors that don't clash, right? When you have colors that are really bright or vibrant next to each other, they can kind of vibrate, right? Which creates this like physical sensation that you can't exactly tell where one color ends and the next one begins. And so it's kind of visually uncomfortable to look at. Similarly, colors that are too close together, again, you have trouble telling them apart, and that can be difficult. So a lot of what we're doing is trying to find colors from different spaces across the color wheel that will work together without being difficult without either clashing with each other or being too similar. If that makes sense.
That makes sense, yes. Okay, next question. Can you provide some examples of good design practices in UI design? I think
That
you had
feels-
some.
I was gonna say that feels very broad. So yes, but it would be more helpful, I guess, if you could give me some specifics in terms of, are you looking for good
Yeah.
design
So
practices?
the person that asked this question, maybe it's a great great for you to reach out to Catherine, and then maybe you can exchange some resources about this.
Absolutely.
Okay. On the subject of balance, how would you set up all the paddings and margins your design needs? How many of them, and in what special cases? Yeah.
So design is frustrating, and a lot of the examples or a lot of the answers are going to be it depends, right? Kind of like development. In general, though, you want to make sure that you have set up enough padding and margin that nothing is kind of running into each other, nothing feels really tightly packed. There's also some good accessibility guidance that the WCAG offers around minimum padding and margins, and making sure that like your buttons or your icons don't overlap and you have like sufficient space in between to designate like different trying to remember what they call them. It's not like click zones, target zones, I think, to make them easily accessible. But you'll see a lot of that. There are also like examples, standard kind of grid examples. I'm trying to remember. I want to say it's called like a 8-point margin or an 8-point grid. The 8-point grid system.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. I walked my way into it. I had to Google that one. So in case you don't ever feel bad about Googling. There is a thing called the 8-point grid system. Thank you for resharing my screen. I kind of forgot about that. And that involves using multiples of 8 to kind of set up a basic layout for your padding, your margins, etc. I would say start here if you're not 100% sure, if you're not feeling like confident or comfortable defining it yourself. But also, if your design needs something else, I always hesitate to suggest like these kinds of set grid systems, because there's always going to be exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
Right? You're always going to run
I
into
see
an element.
everything.
Yeah, you're going to run into an element that needs a little more space, or it's maybe this feels really big and you want to tighten things up. So maybe use this as a jumping off point. It's a good way, like it's a good proportionate scaling method, but also don't feel bound by it.
All right. Oh, this we already had it. Isn't symmetrical and balanced rather boring, and doesn't give a guidance through the page for the reader?
Whether it's boring or not is subjective. But objectively, I can tell you that yes, it will give you guidance throughout the page for the reader. That part will work generally pretty well. So in general, when a reader looks at the page, they're going to scan it in a Z pattern. They'll go across the top, they'll go diagonal across the page, and they'll go along the bottom, right? And that's why we see so many layouts that are like header, big attention grabbing thing in the middle, footer, right?
Yeah.
And that Z pattern, it works the same. Even if we're in a right to left language, the Z will just reverse. They'll just start on the other side and Z in a mirror. So using symmetry, having something that is perfectly balanced, is never going to disrupt your readability. It's not going to leave people floundering, because they're going to get everything in that scan. And where we place the larger items or the things that have more visual weight that we want to draw people's attention to, that's how we guide them, right? Whether symmetry is boring, yeah, it's just anyone's opinion, right? So.
Okay. The next one. How can developers balance functionality with aesthetics in their design?
I would argue you don't have to balance it, because having a good design is going to make it more functional, right? And if you feel like your aesthetics are detracting from functionality, that means it's not a good design.
Yeah.
And I say that in a kind way. But you should never feel like you have to choose between something that looks good and something that works well, because something that looks good is also going to work well. So, right, like a good design is going to help our users do what they want to do more effectively. It's going to guide them to the parts of the page that are most important, and it's going to make our applications feel more intuitive. So I would say that's kind of the design equivalent of like a code smell, right? It's like if you feel you have to choose, then something's off.
Okay. Yeah. What else do we have here? Do you have some ideas on how to use this knowledge to build a beautiful CV? We also had another question about the CV. What colors would you recommend for a CV?
Let's see. Well, in terms of using this knowledge, I would start by thinking about that hierarchy that we talked about, right? Because a lot of times with a CV, what you're trying to do is present a lot of information in a limited space, and you want to prioritize the stuff that is most important, right? So when we think about starting at the top of the page and skimming down, we want to place things that are most important, largest at the top, and then kind of work our way down. So think about the things that you're most proud of, or the things that you think are most likely to appeal to whoever's reviewing this CV. Put those at the top, right? Your contact information at the top, your most impressive credentials at the top, larger, right? And then kind of placing things down the page in a way that scales them to reflect their relevance, right? So you might want to include your college GPA. It's not a bad thing to include. It's probably not a make or break, right? Especially the further away you get from college. So right, like you might want to include your degree in a bigger font, but like your GPA, maybe that's not as important, right? And think about those things in terms of importance and what you want people to see, what you want them to take away. And in terms of colors, honestly, I think it depends. I think it's nice to have a color that kind of brands you, right? So choose a color that you like. And I like to have that as kind of a common thread. So like if you go to my website, you see the same color as if I handed you my CV, right? And it all feels kind of cohesive and thoughtful. I don't think any color is inherently better or worse as long as it's readable. Right? So maybe not like a neon yellow. That would be hard to read on white, but beyond that.
Okay, cool. What else? Top 5 things to avoid while designing a website.
Ooh,
probably clutter.
Let's see. Yeah. I want to say small text, right? Because I feel like you say it's a personal blog, readability then has to be forefront. So I think about what typography choices you can make to make it as easy as possible for people to read the content that you're posting. So think about font size, think about the type style and how readable it is. Don't choose a typeface that's distracting or difficult to read or legible. Clutter, I think you make a really good point in terms of like, again, think about how like a magazine is laid out, right? And when you have it open, there's like often a column of text and there's plenty of white space on either side. If you're thinking about like a nice, like a nice magazine, like a Vogue or something, right? Like, because you want to give people space to read and breathe. We also know there's some guidelines that exist around, I'm trying to remember exactly what they are. I want to say it's like 100 or 120 characters is the furthest our eye can read without starting to get distracted, right? So when we have lots of little line breaks, we get distracted because we have to, the sentence breaks so often it breaks our thoughts. But also text that goes really, really wide, we tend to lose our place when our eyes have to wrap back around.
If you have to go like all the way.
Exactly. So I'd think about that. Yeah, I mean, even right in the website we were looking at with the grid system thing, huge amounts of white space, right? So like, look at all this. Look at all this. Look how thin this is. And even if I make this much bigger, that column of text is not getting any wider. So I would think about that. I would look at blog sites that you like, and I would see what they're doing. And I bet you will find that a lot of it is in service to readability. So I know that wasn't 5 things. I just kind of rambled, but Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah. Okay. And I think one last question we can take. In general, what does your design process look like, and which apps do you use?
This is a good question. I like to start. I will always tell people to start designing on paper, which is a hot take, evidently. But I think that you'll get much further. You don't have to be a good artist or feel like you can draw well, because guess what? Sites are mostly rectangles of various shapes and sizes, right? Like it's just big rectangles and little rectangles. You can totally do that. So I would start on paper because there's something about that you just don't feel as like committed to it. I found that when you open up the Photoshop file or a Figma file or whatever your design tool of choice is, that you just want you get really distracted by the small choices because it makes you choose things like a typeface right away. It makes you sit and worry about the leading and the margins and all of that. Whereas if you're on paper, you can think big picture more easily. It also is harder to just like, I don't know why, to like X out and close a file and lose all your work. There's something that feels so bad about that. Whereas like ripping a page out of a notebook feels way less risky. And I don't know why, but being able to throw away those early designs is crucial because your first few are probably not going to be good. My first few are not going to be good. Like anytime you're starting, there's just...
And then you save a lot of time for not like choosing the colors and the margins and the rounded corners.
So I would say start on paper. When you're ready, move to design software. Mine of choice is Figma, since you asked. I like them a lot. And then once I've got like a pretty solid Figma prototype that I can show off to other people and get other people's like approval or sign off on, then I move to code.
Okay, cool. So we are at the time, but I just need to ask you one more question that I had. I have a few, but this one is, where is it? Difficult to read fonts. I read somewhere that when you read that, it's more memorable.
In a difficult font?
Yeah, because you really have to take more time to read it, and then therefore it stays more in your head. Obviously not for like big copy, but maybe for like some logo or like maybe
it feels like a risk. It feels high risk, high reward. I haven't read that article, so I don't know for sure. But I would say if you had to fight to read something, you probably didn't come away with a positive impression of it. You probably came out of that experience feeling frustrated or aggravated, which in general is not an association that we want with our brands. And also there's some number of people that simply are not going to be able to decipher it, right? If it's that hard, some people will get it and it might stick with them, and some people will give up and walk away and decide that they don't care. So it feels like a risky game to me, but it's an interesting thought.
I thought the same thing when I read it. It's years ago. I will look it up if I find it again.
I'm really curious now. Do send it to me if you find it.
Okay, good. Okay, now we are done with our time. Thanks a lot, Catherine, for these insights. Your very short, how do you say, crash course to basic design. I enjoyed it. If any of you still have questions for Catherine, where can we find you? I see you have your handle there, just Catherine Grayson on Twitter, I suppose.
Yep, I'm on too many things. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky and Mastodon, so you can find me anywhere. I'm at Catherine Grayson on all of those. I'm on LinkedIn, and my website is kgrayson.com. So I'm eternally online. You can find me everywhere. God help me. But do reach out with any questions.
Awesome. So thanks again, and see you around.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we have come to our last talk of the day, which is by Hilla Fish. Unfortunately, Hilla is not with us live, but she sent us a video that we can show you. One thing here is if you have questions, please don't ask them in the Q&A because she's not here to answer them. But at the end of the slide, so keep the questions, maybe write them down. And at the end of the slides, she will have her contact info there, her social media, and you can write her she actually insisted we tell this. So she's very open to receive the questions. So if you have questions, please write her, and she will get back to you for sure. So let's put on Hila Fish's talk about personal branding. Let's go.
Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for joining my talk. And this talk will be about personal branding and job search and how they are both combined. And I'm going to show you the most practical approach you'll ever see, in which I will speak theory very little and then right to the practice. So first of all, hi, my name is Hila Fish. I'm a senior DevOps engineer and I work for Wix. I have 15 years of experience in the tech industry. I have recently joined the AWS Community Builders program, which allows me to connect with like-minded people and talk about AWS services and get exposed to these services. I also recently joined the HashiCorp Ambassador program because I talk about Terraform a lot. I help organize conferences in Israel, where I live, DevOps Days Tel Aviv, which is the largest DevOps Days in the entire world, if I'm not mistaken, and StatsCraft, which is a monitoring conference. I'm a mentor in courses and communities. I'm a DevOps culture fan. I think this is what helps companies achieve great things. And on my spare time, I'm a lead singer in a cover band, as you can see in this picture. So the agenda for today is I will touch a bit about my journey and what you can learn from it. Then I'll get to tips for a better job hunt experience and enhancing your personal branding. And you'll see that in a lot of times they come together. And touch also about the mindset that you should have to deal with these processes that I'm gonna show here. So just about the thing about my journey, why do I share it with you, is because I really believe that you need to speak up if you believe that you will deliver value. AKA, I won't tell you anything if I don't think that you have something to learn from it. Okay, so my journey. My journey is basically it started out in the army, because in Israel we serve the army, and it's not only combat roles, but also stuff with computers. So this is what I did. I was a help desk technician in the army, and then I got evolved from there, and I got to my first high-tech company. I worked as system engineer for 12 years, and then I switched to the DevOps culture and then DevOps job. And the things that I really remember the most between all this moving around and reaching to my first and second jobs in the high-tech industry is the fact that I was A, very, very curious, and B, I spoke a lot. I put myself out there with anyone who could be relevant. And then that way, a lot of opportunities came to me, or I came to learn about opportunities because I was there in that circle. And I'll give you an example. So I started out as my army service was a help desk technician, but my first role in high tech was a system engineer in help desk and system in HP, which is a high tech company. The thing is that HP had a project in the army where I served. And then because I spoke a lot with the HP people, I nagged them like, what do you do now? Do you have some things to throw for me? You know, if you some task that you don't want to do, or you have the time to do it, right? Something like that. And then because I nagged them, because I was always there asking questions, asking for tasks and stuff like that, even though I didn't have to do it, this introduced me to my first job in the high-tech industry, which was HP, the same company, because they saw what I can do. They saw my enthusiasm. So that brought me this opportunity. So that's the thing, that you need to really put yourself out there, which I will talk in a bit more, and just show people that you learn, that you care, that you want something, and then things will fall to place very, very quickly. Okay, so that was very short about my journey. Now I want to go to the actual tips, practical tips that you could take in order to enhance your personal branding and stuff for job search to stand out there and be unique, and then you will increase your options of getting a new job. So first of all, in your CV, in your resume, don't write what you did, write what you achieved. Okay, so I see in a lot of CVs that people say, I installed thousands of servers, okay? But the company doesn't care that you installed servers. Okay, but the company cares of what does it mean that you install the servers. So instead of saying I installed servers, I created X, okay? So the company always care what you can do for them, because the company invests money in you and they want to make sure it's worthwhile for them. So convert anything that you did to what achieved. For example, I could say I reduced some storage. I did maintenance in a way that I was able to reduce storage from our servers room, or I could say it like that. I did migration for storage, blah, 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 which saved X money to the company every month. So this is what they hear. They hear that you saved money for them in a very specific way. Awesome. That's what we want to hear about. So change this mindset to write in your resume, not what you did, but what you achieved, what was the business aspect out of what you did, and then it will showcase the company that you don't only know tech stuff, but you also care about the business. Another tip is the fact that hybrid or full remote became the new norm because COVID-19 changed things, and it opened new opportunities to work remote. So don't limit yourself only to the country that you live in. For example, I currently in my current job, I have a team member that lives in Ukraine. Okay, so don't just, even if you like being in the office a lot, still hybrid became the new norm, and even full remote. So if you are having troubles of finding a job in the same country or the same city that you live in, try to go elsewhere. Try, Ukraine, Israel, anywhere, and it will open a lot of other doors for you. So this is another tip that I want to share with you, is the fact that job description is not a religion, okay? So even if you don't tick all the boxes that they require in the job description, it doesn't matter. Submit your resume anyway. There was also a study that supports that, that showed that when men submit resumes for a job that they found, they submit the CV even if they're only 50% qualified for the job. As opposed to that, women submit only if they are 80 or 90% qualified for the job. That's not great. So that's why this tip came from, that even if you don't tick all the boxes, submit anyway. And how do I know that it actually works? Because this is how I got accepted to one of my previous jobs. I saw that I didn't qualify for almost anything. I submitted anyway. I got the job, and after I got the job, I got back to the job description and I read it to myself. I'm like, I got it. I don't got it. Nope, 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 nope. I have a little. Nope, nope, nope. Stuff like that, exactly like that. So only a little I was very qualified, and still they hired me for the job because they saw the potential, but also because a lot of things, job description is like, it's not really must have, but nice to have. So they would want the people to come with A, B, C, D, E, F, but in de facto, they will willing to be settled. It's not really settled. They will realize that what you have is enough for the job description, and anything else that they wrote is probably under the nice to have. So submit anyway. And I'll give you a metaphor for that, okay? So let's think about like the ideal husband or wife, okay? You want them to be beautiful. You want them to be smart and funny and witty and knows how to cook and being a handyman and stuff like that. But you will even date them almost on the basis of their kindness, right? Same goes for job description. They want all of these, yeah, but they will hire you even if you don't have all of those stuff. So always submit, and think about it also this way. If you don't submit, then you already have a no, okay? So if you will submit, you might have a yes. So submit, and please don't be your own hurdle and don't be your own obstacle. There's a lot of things out there that will be a challenge for us, so let's not making us one of them. Another tip, connections equals foot at the door. So people, in a lot of companies, they have like a bonus for a friend brings a friend. So if someone works in the company, they get a bonus if they bring someone to HR to hire, and then they got hired. So if you have connections to any company, use it, because connections usually vouch for their referrals, so you should use that. And even if you don't have connections in a certain company, try to find one in a, let's say, in a community that you're a part of. For example, if you have a community in tech, you can say, hey, does someone work in ABC? And then you can just submit your CV through these people. Because the thing is that HR or the recruiting in the company, they treat your CV differently when it came from a referral than from a regular site submission. They just treat it differently. Even if the person will say, I'm not familiar with this person, they just ask me to refer, still you'll have more bonus points because you try to find someone that works there. It shows your effort, right? Instead of just, I got to the site, I submitted there, and that's it. So try to find any connection that works in the company that you want to work for, and then submit through these people. GitHub is not only for developers, okay? So yeah, GitHub is a code-based repository, but it doesn't have to be only that. I will give you an example. Let's say you want to be an analyst or a researcher, okay? So you can create a repository and upload analysis that you did of security breaches, for example, and then submit this repository as your portfolio. And then you'll be thinking out of the box. You will have a way to share with them your repository, and not just a doc file, right, with the analysis that you did. It's very organized, it's very thoughtful, it's very out of the ordinary. So utilize GitHub not only for code, but anything that you can think of that you can store there and use it to showcase as your portfolio. And if you are a developer, so GitHub, if we mentioned GitHub, the GitHub has a program called GitHub Stars, okay? So it's very, very important for personal branding because GitHub Stars is a recognition that is really, really awesome to have if you care about personal branding. And if you don't know, GitHub Stars is just but a cool program that basically give you a star, like this recognition, if you contributed a lot in open source and stuff like that. So if you are a developer, contribute to open source, and I will touch on it a bit, and submit a lot, and maybe you will get recognized like that, and it's a very prestige recognition. And yeah, just think about it. And I mentioned open source. So if you are a developer, open source for the win, okay? Don't just do side projects and mention them on your CV. Contribute to actual open source projects, because it will teach you a lot more than just to practice writing code, because opening a PR pull request is the same as opening it if you are in a company, because it's the same process, and people will review your code, which is exactly as team members that will review your code. So it's a very, very good practice to do, and even to gain experience, even if you're not in a real company, because working on an open source project will teach you a lot about the industry and how to work in a team and being part of a corporation, let's say. So that, and also contributing to open source is awesome, because not a lot of people are doing it. So right away you are putting yourself out there, and not putting yourself out there, standing out. You're making yourself stand out, which is awesome. But also it will improve your code. It will show them that you really care, because usually open source contributors are people that they care about the projects and writing code, and not just something that they do for money. So I only see positive things for contributing to open source. That, make an action item out of your strongest asset. And what do I mean by that? Let's say you have a keen eye for detail and you want to be a QA engineer, right? So let's say you approach the HR of the company through LinkedIn, or you have you don't submit through someone, you submit through the site, but you can upload a file there. Okay, what am I getting here? So let's say you have a keen eye for detail and you want to be a QA engineer. Awesome. Go to a website of the company that you're applying to and find something off, a bug, a typo, or at least something that you think should be changed or fixed, and then send this to the HR that hires for the QA engineering role, or the recruiting manager at this company. You can find it easily in LinkedIn, and mention that you will fix it if you will get hired. And I believe they will allow you to interview without ticking half of the requirements boxes, because this kind of approach is not called like, hi, I want to apply X. No, you're coming with something that you researched already. You went to their site, you invested time. It shows a lot of effort, a lot of interest in that company. And I really believe that if you weren't able to put a foot at the door in other ways, this will help you achieve and getting an interview. So the keen eye for detail is only an example. Even if you want to be a UX designer, you can go to the site and point out some design mistakes in your opinion, stuff like that. So just make an action item out of your strongest assets, use them in order to get the next interview or the next job. Leveraging social media. So we have a lot of platforms for social media, right? Like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Slack, whatever. A lot of Telegram also. A lot of platforms. So use them. Write posts, tweet, anything relevant, publish videos. All of these kind of things will enhance your personal branding, because you're putting yourself out there. You show people what you know, what you care about, what you think. It will show your perspective on things. And not only that, even if you post like only share of things and you put your personal opinion about something, it matters, and it constantly puts you out there and in the mind of the people that read your posts, which is good, because then if they'll have like a opportunity to grant or they need to hire someone, they will remember you as an option, because you said you're looking for a new job and look what cool thing I learned today in Java or whatever. So putting yourself out there and keeping yourself in thoughts of anyone will also result in opportunities, because then maybe something will pop up on their side and then they will remember you and offer you this option. And really, you can post about anything, about let's say in your job search, document your journey and write about new techie stuff that you learned during the search, as I mentioned before. And also about leveraging social media is that you should be engaged in communities on Facebook or Slack, because they will see your presence and again, they will remember you. So not only post, but also engage in communities, reply to posts and stuff like that, and your presence will be remembered. Put yourself out there. Okay, so I hear people say, I'm a junior, I only have 1 year experience in the industry, so I can't give talks in conferences, because what do I know? You can. Okay, I personally know 2 juniors that went on stage and talked about very techy stuff, and people listen and people learn from it. So being a junior doesn't mean you can give talks in conferences or write posts about technical stuff, because it doesn't mean that you don't know. And even if it's something very, very basic, still, you will explain it in a different way than other people that will explain it. So I can have 10 articles for the same thing of how to define IAM, but because you explain it differently and with more screenshots or whatever, then your article will be the most helpful for me, because the way you have written it. So everyone writes in different styles, and maybe your style will be the most helpful for me. So always put yourself out there, write on anything, try to talk in conferences, and just put yourself out there in the online presence and offline as much as you can, because it will create a lot of opportunities for you. Sorry. And why did I say for me? Because I put myself out there a lot. And then one day I got this reaction. I see you everywhere. You know what I have replied for that reaction? Good. Okay? Thank you. Good. That's it. Don't apologize, because some people say, yeah, I have some off or work, or I don't know even what excuses to apologize for, because there is no there shouldn't be any reason to apologize because you put yourself out there. So just say, if someone say, I see you everywhere, just say, good, thank you, that's it. So putting yourself out there will only bring good things to your career, whether you just start out or even when you're a senior and you want to make yourself known more. So personal branding is everything, and putting yourself out there is one of the consistent and major ways to enhance your personal branding. Okay, so I gave you, I believe, a lot of tips of how to enhance your personal branding and to find your next job and be distinguished while searching. And now I want to cover the mindset that you should have in order to basically do all of the things that I showed before, doing it easier or making it more like of a habit. So this is first the first mindset that I want you to have. Connections are opportunities. So you don't know where the opportunity will come from, okay? And once you have this mindset, then hopefully you'll actively do things to help you gain and generate more connections. So go to meetups and introduce yourself to people and do anything that you can, because you never know where the opportunity will come from. And I will give you one example for that. I myself participated in a LinkedIn challenge in order to be more active in LinkedIn. And then one of the exercises that were part of the challenge was to add 10 people in LinkedIn every day. And she said 10 should be quite enough. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And in LinkedIn, it's very easy to add someone that you don't know. It's still best to send a personalized invite, but people tend to more accept people that they don't know at all as a connection, because they think that they could serve them something, right? Like either connect with because they want the product that they're selling, or they both speak on the same topics. And if I will get exposed to that person in the world, then maybe I will learn something. But so it was a bit off topic. So I had a challenge adding 10 people a day, and then I'm like, hey, why not? I'm a senior DevOps engineer. I will add CTOs. What the heck? Opportunities, right? I will add CTOs. Maybe it will help me in my career and finding my new role and stuff like that. So I sent a connection request to some CTOs in Israel. One CTO specifically approved, a lot of CTOs approved my connection request, but specifically one of them that approved the connection request, he approached me on private messages because he saw that in my profile, I published a tech talk that I did, and it was my first tech talk ever in a conference, and it was 5 minutes, like Ignite talk about open source adoption and how it, like key metrics in order to adopt open source in your company. So it was a tech talk of 5 minutes. This CTO watched this tech talk, and then based on that, he offered me to participate in his podcast, aka opportunity, which I wouldn't even get to it if I didn't just send him a connection request on LinkedIn. So connections are always opportunities. It's a very important mindset to have. And once you have it, you will see that things will just start to happen. You just need to be active and embrace new connections, and even as much as you can, maintain them, and then you will get a lot of opportunities. Second mindset is, first of all, yes, Okay, be open to everything. And if an opportunity knocks at your door, say yes, even if you're not sure that something will come out of it, because we need to explore it. Because the reality is that anything could happen and result from something, either directly or indirectly. So let's say you said yes to something that you thought that what will I gain from it, or something like that. Something after doing this yes and doing the activity that you accepted, then something can come out of it, like someone saw you in this event, or the post that someone made you write, or anything like that. Someone saw it and then could create the next opportunity, the next connection for you. So we don't know anything that could happen out of anything, and the most important thing is to just be more active and be in the motion always. So first of all, yes, accept, then work out all the details to see if it's really something that you can't do. Brand is everything, okay? So whenever we write things online, we are a person offline as well, right? So that's why we should always introduce ourselves by our full name. Why? Because I write stuff online, and people see me online from recordings from conferences that I did, but then they meet me offline and they don't know if it's me, because not everyone recognizes the face, right? So it happened to me. I'm speaking out of experience. I went to a meetup, and then she said, hi, my name is Karen, my name is X. And then I said, hi, my name is Hila Fish. And then someone pop up and said, because hey, you're the one that wrote the post about writing your full name, or presenting yourself with full name on LinkedIn, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's me. She wouldn't be possible. She wouldn't have the opportunity to link between my offline presence, my offline me as a persona, to my online persona without having this full name link. So always present yourself in a full name, especially if you do stuff online, because that way people can connect your online persona to your offline persona. And always think about what you do and convey things publicly, and then people will perceive you in a way that you portrayed yourself. So that's another thing. And another thing about the full name is that people will remember you better, and will be also able to find you online if they need to, and connect the dots between your online and offline presence. So let's say you said something useful for them, they wanted to create a connection with you later on through LinkedIn, whatever. How can they find you if you don't put your full name, right? So introducing yourself with the full name is very important, and really can help enhancing your brand, because you connect all the dots. Another thing, another mindset: your previous background is not your weakness, it is your strength. Okay, your previous background is what makes you you, and what brought you to this point, and the tool belt that you have. Okay, so your tool belt is comprised of the things that you did in your previous background. So think how your background in either economics or education or whatever can help you in your next job. So let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a background in finance. So, for example, you can write a financial report of a company based on something that they published, and then automate something based on it, or link to that report, and then attach it to the CV or LinkedIn message that you will be sending. And that way, if you have a background in economics or finance, and you want to be now a software developer or automation developer, then you can use your financial background, like I mentioned now, automate it, and then attach it to your CV. And then I assure you, it will be very new, and they wouldn't expect to gain something out of it, like two types of gains, right? Financial analysis, and also to see a candidate who is very unique. So that's one example that you can do. and really understand that your previous background is not your weakness. You can definitely leverage it as a strength. So find what makes you unique and utilize that to find your next job that will celebrate your uniqueness. Think out of the box. So let's say, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Israel, a lot of people go to study computer science in the university and then try to apply for their first job in a high tech. So everyone is doing the same, okay? Going to school, to university, applying, and that's it. But not a lot of people can find a job quickly because of that. And why? Because a lot of people are doing the same. A lot of people learn in the university and apply. So there are a lot of candidates which have the same background of just these studies, and that's it. And if you see that you did the same and you apply and it takes time to get to the first or the new job, then it can show that the same thing that other people do and you do as well haven't gotten you results. Otherwise, you wouldn't probably even be here listening to a stranger like me. So do things differently and make yourself stand out from the rest and find all the ways that will make you unique and put your CV up above all the pile of other CVs. And I gave you throughout this presentation a lot of ways that you can see and do in order to stand out and do things differently in a way that will make the hiring process, people invite you to an interview and stuff like that. So thinking out of the box is awesome and could only do good things for you. Be open-minded. So even if something is not as you expected, or you define a specific goal for yourself or specific path, still be open-minded, because you might discover new possibilities and new path that you didn't expect but will do good. So even if you think you figure something out, but if you have opportunity or you see some other paths that you didn't think of, try to go on this path because you don't really know. Maybe you will learn that that was the right path all along. So be open-minded and don't be strict to whatever you think you want. If something is coming at your door or you can find other paths, try them as well because it could serve good. This is a quote that I found. Let's read it together. The secret of success is to do the common thing uncommonly well. So since everyone is doing the same thing and the same thing, again, didn't get you results, then you should do either something different, okay? Or you can very much excel in doing the same thing that everyone is doing, but in a very excelled way. So what do I mean by that? Everyone is really using LinkedIn, okay? Like they write posts and I don't know, they write posts and that's it. But not all of the people in LinkedIn are influencers, right? You see that sometimes they, there's some people that are like that have like 1,000 followers, and why you see that they post something maybe different, like perspectives on things, and or not only posting technical stuff, but varies in the topics that they post about. So they do the common thing of using LinkedIn, but in an uncommonly way. They did it good and they leverage it in a way that maybe others didn't think of because they thought there's only one way to do something. So in order to succeed, you either need to do something entirely different from other people or do the same thing, but in an uncommon way, in a way that it also gives a twist to the same thing. Like everyone uses LinkedIn, use it a bit differently. Like for example, about LinkedIn, everyone writes posts about hiring and stuff like that. Write something emotional, and this will, I guarantee you, will attract a lot of focus to you, a lot of vulnerability that will is exposure, I agree, but people will relate to you because you feel like a human being and not just a highly technical person. So even though LinkedIn is not considered to be the place to share your feelings, do it anyway. And then you do the same thing. You use LinkedIn like everyone else, but you do it uncommonly well, aka in a way that will make it more unique. So to sum things up, what we talked today, you should be proactive, because being proactive is very, very important and really helps you be kept in the mind of people and put you still in motion, because if you're in motion, then things will happen. Either if you want it or not, things will happen, just setting things in motion. So be always proactive. Networking is key, okay? So we said that connections are opportunities. Network as much as you can, online and offline, and it will for sure will bring you opportunities, either for enhancing your personal brand or for finding your next job. Consistency is key. So we said that you need to be in the minds of people all the time. You wouldn't be in the mind of the people if you're not consistent, because if you post once a month or once a couple of months, people will forget, because there will be other people who are constant in the rate of publishing their posts or blog posts. So consistency is key, even if you don't have the will to do it in a certain week. So prepare some posts in advance, and that way you have pipeline even if you lost motivation for a week. So yeah, consistency is very, very important, and it's good also for algorithms of LinkedIn and stuff like that is based on consistency, but also because if you are there, people will see you all the time and will remember you. Creativity is key. So I really believe that doing things different is the way to go, because it's very hard to do something uncommonly well, as I showed before. So I think that the way to go is being creative, being different, do things in an out-of-the-box way, and that will put yourself out there in a more distinctive way, and you will stand out. And you really have to remember that patience is needed, but it will be worth it, because you will eventually find your first job or second job, and you will eventually have your personal brand that strong that people will want to hire you on the spot, and you don't need to go and wait and find the job interviews yourself. People will come to you. So patience is needed. It takes time to build it, but it is definitely worth it. So this is a very good quote that I really, really like. If someone tells you that you can't, they're just showing you their limits, not yours. Okay? So don't listen to people, and be on your own way. And even if you fail, do it again, because failure is a way of life, and only the way to succeed is through failures along the way. So even if someone tells you you can't, they're showing you their limits, not yours. And I even saw a meme a couple of days ago that if you really want to do something, don't share it with anyone. Because sometimes people say, "Nah, why do you need it for?" Or, "Hey, you had a successful career in finance. What do you want to go and be a product designer or be a software developer? Come on." So they say it out of their pain, okay, and their self confidence and stuff like that. So don't listen to anyone that tells you that you can't. That's the thing. So that's it for my presentation. I really, really hope that you enjoyed it, that you will really thought that it was the practical guide that you will ever find, because I really try to be as practical as I could be and give you tips and think differently in order to emphasize those tips. But still, if you have questions or you want some advice about your career path or anything of the sort, feel free to reach out through LinkedIn. I have this QR, you can scan it, or through Twitter, and then I'll be happy to help, because we're here for each other. So thanks again, and hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
All right, so this was our last talk of the day. I hope you all learned something cool. I know I did. As Hila said, if you have any more questions for her, just reach out on her social media, on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and she will get back to you there. I want to mention one more time that we have a discount code for our upcoming Congress. It's a developer conference with over 10,000 developers, over 300 speakers. It's over 2 days, and it's amazing. I really like the experience. So you can go to worldcongress.dev, and you can use this display discount code WWC students to get a 10% discount only today if you use it today. All right. Our next live day is going to be in 2 weeks exactly on May 24th, and it's going to be about Web3. So if you are into Web3, if you enjoy that, or if you want to know more what it is, how it works, then tune in next week not next week, in 2 weeks, and I hope to see you there. So far, have a great rest of your day, and see you around. Bye-bye.
Have you found your dream job as a developer? Or are you stuck in an unfulfilling job? On WeAreDevelopers.com, you find over 1,000 jobs in Europe that fit the tech stack that you want to work with, and salaries go up to $130K. All you have to do is create a free profile, and you automatically get matched with jobs that fit your requirements. So what are you waiting for? Create your free profile and let companies apply to you now.